All right, good evening. Welcome. Happy New Year. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's holidays were great. We will go ahead and get kicked off. And as we have members that need to go take pictures, we will just take care of that and do what we got to do. Are there any questions about the agenda tonight? All right, Tansy, any updates from you?
I only have one very brief update. I do want to recognize that Joyce, she's not in the room at this particular moment. So Joyce Hunt will retire at the end of this week. So this will be officially her last Tuesday night with us. We spent lots of time celebrating Joyce, and she's probably purposely not here in the room to have this happen. So with that, I'll be else, Kristen.
Thank you. Tammy?
Nothing for me. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, well, let's jump right into briefings. First, we have the presentation from Almost Home and Growing Home.
Yay. Right into it. Love it. Here?
Oh, yeah.
This one? Yay, thanks, y'all. Yeah, great to be here. Appreciate it. And we can just dive right in. We're going to be doing program overviews, housing services outlook, and talking about the future. So next slide. Oh, just kidding. Oh, yeah. I have my own. Thank you. Like, who's in charge here? I am. My name's Delaney Coe. I'm the Deputy Director at Almost Home, where our mission is to empower self-sustainability by providing assistance to those experiencing housing instability.
And I'm Veronica Perez. I'm the CEO of Growing Home. And as many of you know, we provide services in food, housing, lifelong stability, and early childhood education. So we're really excited to be here to present to everyone about our services and, again, as Delaney mentioned, the future.
Awesome. So we'll start with an overview of Almost Home Services before I pass it off back to Veronica. And I want to start with our housing stability program, which is really going to be a program we focus on in our presentation today. That's our rental, mortgage, and utility assistance program that's paired with case management, all designed to keep people in their homes, not only immediately stabilize them, but really set them up for long-term success and independence in the community. We also have many programs for those who are unhoused, including rapid rehousing, which is meant to get people quickly into to secure a place of their own. And then we really work closely with that household for the next 6 to 12 months on building their foundation and ensuring that they can move on to, again, independence and stability for the long term. Our emergency family shelter is actually our flagship program that kicked the whole Almost Home organization off back in 1993 with a 7-family, really a communal living type home environment in Brighton, where folks are able to stay for 60 days, get their feet under them, work on income, applications for housing, and all with the goal of moving again into their own place for the long term. Our other shelter programs includes the Severe Weather Activation Program, known to many as SWAP, which uses hotels actually to really be able to increase or decrease the amount of shelter we need for inclement weather. So that is 32 degrees when it's precipitating and below, or 20 degrees and below under any weather conditions. We also do activate for heat in the summer at 97 and above. Oh, and I forgot. I have a handout. So you all
We'll I'll hand that over to Robin too,
and then
she's helping pass them out.
Sorry,
I got you.
Thank you. I forgot I have assistants. Thanks, guys. And that'll show you also Thornton specific numbers. So a lot of folks know Almost Home is a Brighton organization, and it's true. We were founded there years ago. But we do actually serve a very high proportion of Thornton residents, as you'll see here, anywhere between 25% and 40% of our participants are Thornton residents across these programs. So SWAP, it's 25% year after year, and a little bit higher for some of our other programs, like housing stability. Our street outreach program is really filling the cracks in the rest of our programs, where we have a team that just goes out and meets people where they are, whether that's walking trails, going to encampments to offer assistance, or hotspots like libraries, various places, really to just make those services accessible, build trust, and get people in the door to the rest of the continuum of support. Last but not least, our last shelter program is our respite housing program, and that is also using hotels for short-term stays that are really a private environment for families who are facing situational homelessness, really those short-term crisis-driven housing instability moments where someone suddenly loses a job, medical emergency, or we see domestic violence. People are no longer able to stay in their home and be safe. So we do actually offer up to 90 days for those folks who are fleeing violence. And all of these services are paired with case management, all meant to really help folks establish their goals and make progress on those, get resources along the way, so that long-term they can be safe and stable in their own housing.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. So a little bit about Growing Home. I'll give a really quick overview and really want to jump into what things are looking like for the future. And so Growing Home offers a food pantry that is a choice model, shopping specifically based on need. We received a lot of feedback. We've been operating this pretty actively since 2020 when COVID hit, but we realized, okay, giving a box can only do so much. Not that that's wrong, because I know a lot of our partners do that. However, we received a lot of feedback from our unhoused community, from our other communities of single family homes, and from our senior community, that there was a need for some change. And so we've made some shifts in terms of how we serve. It is a full shopping model. Each participant that comes through the food pantry receives a personal shopper that attends with them and helps guide them through the food pantry. Not just saying, hey, you can get XYZ, but saying, well, what is this eggplant? Some folks have no idea what an eggplant is, how to cook with an eggplant, and what that uses for. So we've really added a component around education as well. And when folks come in, they take anywhere from 3 to 5 days worth of food, and they're able to come through twice a month. For our unhoused participants, they are able to come through every week. And we have done a different program for them where we do a bag program, and it is shelf stable items. If they do have a form of like a stove where they're able to cook and whatnot, we are able to give them things like eggs and just other items that they are able to cook, but it's very tailored to their needs. And we have about 82 unhoused participants that come through throughout the year. The other piece that we added into our food pantry this past year was Senior Fridays. So our senior community is really starting to grow in Adams County, and they can't stand in lines for as long. They don't always have the transportation to get where they need to get. And so now on Fridays, they're able to come through. They have a different colored card because all of our systems are done with data and we have tracking all of the things, but they receive a card, special color. They're able to skip the line, get their shopping done before everyone else, and able to go home so they don't have to wait in lines for a long time. In terms of our resource navigation program, that is really where every single program at Growing Home provides resource navigation. You could be in our Parents as Teachers program for early childhood education. You could be coming through the food pantry. You could also be doing some of our work in the community garden. Anywhere we have those spaces, folks can receive resource navigation. We also work with Adams County. We have several of their staff that come on site and work with our food pantry participants to do those services as well. So really just being really inclusive and really trying to provide that holistic wraparound service model for anyone that comes through Growing Home. Our final program, and this one is our largest and longest, is our Parents as Teachers program. It's an early childhood education program for 0 to 5 years old. And in this time, our parent educators go into the home twice a month and work with families on how to be their child's best first teacher. In addition to that, they do early identification of disability. They are doing BRACs, they are doing hearing and vision tests. And once they hit 3 years old, every 6 months, we are doing the preschool test to make sure that they are early childhood ready. So, and that is done until they go into school or until they have their graduation in July of the year. So we have families that have been anywhere with us from 5 years to 10 years because one kid exits the program and comes through. But we've seen a lot of growth in that space, and there is no income requirement to enter the program. So anybody can be in that program. So yes, really excited about sharing those pieces around our programming. And now what I want to talk through is the changes that are coming down the line. So one thing I want to mention is that all local providers of rental and mortgage assistance received TANF contracts through Adams County And then we did have a non-renewal that happened in late to 2025, right? So Growing Home, Almost Home, Family Tree, and Comitas Crisis Center. Really, those funds have gone away. And so I really want to be clear that TANF is not going to come back. And that is one of the changes that we've really been working on these last 6 months to figure out how are we going to support our community with these needs. The other piece is that Adams County TANF funds also supported our only year-round shelter run by Almost Home. And so that is something that has also shifted and gone away because TANF funds are no longer available. So Almost Home still has very limited funds for rental and mortgage assistance. Growing Home does not. We expended those funds in December of 2025. These funds played a huge role really around the evictions and homelessness specifically in the county. And so we've already seen a surge in evictions go up in the last 6 months. So in talking with that, and one of our friends here, Robin, has been passing out some forms. So there is a specific impact report that is specific to Thornton and your numbers. And then we have a few other items around cost. And all of this is research-based, driven by data, and very, very much we have that infrastructure to work through the program. And so one of the other pieces I really wanted to say is just overall, when we ran our program from 2019 to 2025, we really saw a huge shift in how people receive their case management. So with Growing Home, very similar to Almost Home, it really isn't transactional. They received 3 months of case management, two meetings a month, very similar to a lot of our other programs. And we really tried to expend the total amount of funds, which is $5,000 per household in a year, in a 12-month cycle. But instead of using those $5,000 in that first month, we really were able to parcel it out over 3 months to provide them that case management that really leads to stability, right? And we survey our participants every year. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of misunderstanding around what participants that receive this funding look like. In reality, every single time we talk to them, it was due to an injury, illness, change in job, or cut in hours. So it wasn't, we don't have a job, it's this change has actually happened. And many, many times it was really due to the breadwinner having some sort of an illness and not being able to work. So we really saw that layoff process, that loss of job really be the main reason. The other piece that I really wanted to hit home on was we did see a shift in the last few years, I will say. Whereas we had that $5,000 to really work with every family, it used to be, I owe $600 from the upcoming month. We are talking folks coming to us $3,000 or more now owing back rent. So that landscape has shifted a little bit. So the case management really was necessary for us because we also monitored stability in housing 30 days after exit, 60 days after exit, 90 days after exit to see if they are stably housed. And we really go by a specific, tone on that end. So again, not for any other reason, y'all, but a change in life. And many times what we saw was this could happen to anybody. Many of us are an accident, an illness away from being in a very similar situation. Yeah, so in terms of our record of success, Growing Home really does have the infrastructure for this. So we were able to and the reason why it's only up to June 2025 is because that's when Adams County made the cut in funding and went from the full contract amount to probably about a 3% amount. So it came out to about $110K for the span of 3 to 6 months. So in these, when we talk about unduplicated households, we're talking about, okay, we only count it as like the one household, but times that times 4 or 5 or 7, whatever that household number is. So in total, it was about 1530 in terms of individuals. And this is specific to Thornton. So I want to let you know we are hitting home. Specifically, these are Thornton numbers. And in the 2024 in-depth, as I told you, we saw a shift in the landscape. 169 households just in that time period, an average of $3,600, whereas it really shifted from that 600 back up to kind of the thousands again. And we were still seeing 70% increase their financial score, which we track in terms of a bridge to self-sufficiency. So we look at many components of a person, even when they are coming in just for housing case management. In that sense too, they also had a 63% increase in their well-being score. And we have found that there is a huge correlation around mental health and wellness supports, especially when it comes to housing and food insecurity. Then again, the other big piece about our program and what we did on our case management was how do we coach families and individuals, households, to reduce their housing cost burden? Because most folks, you're looking at a 30%, right? But we know here in Colorado, many of us are paying more than 30% of our income on housing. And so it is another type of coaching that we provide to say, hey, how can we work on more long-term stability instead of here's your $5,000 this year and see you in 12 months. So really, again, that side-by-side coaching to really help them get where they need to go. So yeah.
And to continue, thank you, with Thornton numbers, we wanted to highlight what this gap is going to look like for Thornton residents with the loss of just under $3 million from those TANF grants. So this breaks down the number of Thornton households that were only served with that funding source specifically in that last grant year period. And we are looking at over 600 households, and that's like Veronica said, depending on how many people in that house, we're talking in the thousands of individuals who in Thornton will not be able to turn to this resource as of really now at the new year.
The new year.
And this is really notable as well because the funding wasn't only lost in Thornton, it was lost across the county. And to the extent that there's going to be ripple effects that happen regionally, Thornton, these gaps will exist in the cities that are our neighbors here as well. And this is really important to look at here in this region because, and I'll put it simply, Adams County has a disproportionate number of eviction filings for the state, and Thornton has a disproportionate number of eviction filings for Adams County. So of all cities who might want to look at this issue and how it might impact longer term costs, frankly, for your residents and for the way that evictions impact the society at large, this is an issue here in Thornton. And to give you the numbers, we're 9% of the state here in Adams County, 15% of eviction filings coming from here in the last year. And if you look within the county, 60% of those are Thornton, which is these zip codes here, which we all know, not a perfect representation because zip code lines don't fall perfectly on city lines, but our best representation of that shows essentially a super majority for Thornton households who, again, these are filings. And as you look further into the data, it's notable that 80 to 85% of those eviction filings are simply non-payment of rent. No other lease violations, it's just that they're behind. And the only way to then prevent that eviction from going through to the person losing their home is money. And for many, rental assistance, because they don't have, a family member who can help them out, to turn to, or anything like that. And we are seeing also in the state of Colorado, it's significant. We have a law that says evictions can be prevented if rental assistance is provided anytime before final judgment is entered, which is helpful for folks to be able to, get their feet under them, access resources, and make sure they have a plan for the future. Our legal assistance partners over at Colorado Legal Services, CPLP, their ability to mount a defense is largely hinging on a tenant applying for assistance. So they can say, hey, this person's doing what they can. When there's no assistance to even apply for, to say, oh, it's pending, now we're running into, there's nowhere for people to go, and we're going to see evictions going through at much higher rates than they have been. If you're interested in what is still available, we did include a link here. And you'll see it's patchwork. So, we've got maybe 20,000 here for victims of domestic violence, 50,000 here for Commerce City residents. So it really starts depending where you live, what your situation is. So your average struggling Thorntonite won't necessarily have a foundational resource to turn to. And where we do have that, simply the number of households we can serve has gone down because the funding has gone down. So again, we're projecting here and wanting to kind of raise to your attention from what we see on the ground is the evictions going through at a higher rate, which Veronica will talk about the impacts of that.
So I think, I do understand. We're kind of preaching to the choir, right? But this education is really, really important because we understand that it's not just housing, right? It's not just homelessness prevention. We're talking about ripple effects in our health community, in our education, public safety, employment, everything, right? If you're really looking at what that costs and the ripple effects do happen. So we've done all of our research really around the different studies that are available and specific local to our area. And really what we've seen is that prevention programs provide significant savings to municipalities and governments. It really helps that prevention because once we look at in several other studies we've seen, but the number tends to be anywhere from 20 to 30,000. One Denver study that was more recent was $31,545 per person is what you can save on emergency services alone. And that's per unhoused person. And so if we look at these numbers and it being a little bit more disproportionate, specifically in our area, Adams County, Thornton area, we're looking at actual savings if we can truly invest in rental and mortgage assistance in some form or fashion. And so in really thinking about that piece, this is what we're looking for: partnership, truly partnership, and what we can do here. TANF, as I said earlier, it's gone, y'all. It's done. It's not coming back. And so what we need is how can we continue to support this actual need so that we're not seeing the ripple effects through the city of Thornton? Because yes, there are other places and y'all are one of our stops. We're talking with all of our municipalities here in ADCO because it's not just a Thornton problem. It's kind of an all of us problem at this point. And so how can we partner maybe as multiple municipalities? If you don't have the infrastructure, can we work together and say, hey, Growing Home and Almost Home, we have built an infrastructure over the last few years to where we are ready to hit the ground running. We have our processes in place. We have the data. We can help you. It's now about how can we support the communities. It also doesn't have to be us. Can municipalities themselves put this program into place? If you don't have the infrastructure, we'll partner. We have other organizations that are also willing to partner, but something truly has to be done. And we're not getting any smaller here in Adams County, specifically Thornton. We're growing. And so how can we help each other? As you know, we're resilient. We've been around for almost 28 years now. Almost Home is in the same situation, but we can't do it all. We can't fill all the gaps. And the reality is there are not enough providers out there providing this type of rental and mortgage assistance. And now with the funds gone, there are even less resources for our community members. So really what we need is just partnership with you and how can we continue to work together? How can we get the messaging out even to our community members? Because it is a community problem at this point. So really that is the big piece. And so there is hope. One thing that we wanted to share, and this is our final piece, is there are other programs that have been created. Commerce City has announced their own rental and mortgage assistance program as of last year, and they've been able to work with that. Denver has had theirs. It's a little, there's some touch and go with it, but they have had a program in place for many years. So what we could do is, as a municipality, could you directly invest in these programs and in contractors like Growing Home and Almost Home so that we can support our community members? We've built a coalition, y'all. We are so connected with our other partners in Adams County that do not just homelessness prevention work, but all other types of social service work in the community, in addition to what municipalities do. So it really is about that long-term partnership. What can we do? And then, of course, on the final piece, really what we've looked toward is, could there be some sort of tax reform efforts, maybe some ballot measures to really work on stabilizing this revenue in that end so that we have kind of a source moving forward? We know that budgets are being squeezed, period. We're all feeling it across the state and honestly here in the US. And so how can we partner? Because we are just stronger together, y'all. We are stronger together. We can't do it by ourselves. And we're all in this because it's going to affect all of us in the long term. So I just thank you for hearing us. And I know they said y'all might have questions, so I will stop talking.
Thank you for the time today. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I got Justin, then John.
Thank you for the presentation. This is very valuable information. I do have several questions. My first is to staff about the scheduling of this. Was it the intent to double book picture time? This very important presentation, because I think that's unacceptable. I mean, these are two executives from valued nonprofits in our community, and we can't even give them enough respect to have the whole council listen to the presentation.
So unfortunately, we'd already had photos planned for this meeting. This was a lighter meeting. We have a number of new council members that don't have photos. And so we did get requests to add this to the agenda. We looked for the closest possible date to make sure that this presentation got scheduled. So yeah, it is unfortunate, but we did already have a photographer booked already for this meeting, for this date, knowing that we had new members of the council join. It is unfortunate, and I apologize if the presenters felt like that was some level of disrespect or inattention. Was not the intent.
I feel like it was a disrespectful move and the wrong move to do it the way it was handled. So I think that city manager's office owes these organizations an apology. That's my thought, but back to the issue, I wanted to thank you all for coming in here, and my first question was about the eviction programs that you have and how they relate to the cycle of homelessness relative to other programs, like for example, safe parking or initiatives that you have to help prevent people from ultimately ending up in the worst outcome, which is living on the streets. So could you give us a little more context into the other programs on how they bookend eviction assistance programs and how they ultimately lead to better outcomes for residents?
Yes, I think it's important that we have a continuum of programs, in part because we are looking at both sort of the inflow aspect and then the outflow, right? So programs like safe parking that are really a great way to catch people early on. They're, maybe having to now live in their cars, and we can provide them a safe place to stay with resources, services, and what they need to maintain stability on site so that they can move on into housing again. Same deal with our rapid rehousing programs, and all of our sheltering programs are designed to be that kind of safety net to catch people when, as you said, it's happened. They've been evicted, they've lost their housing, they're in this situation. So that that outflow, moving folks out of the homelessness system and into housing is a huge chunk of our programming. But that really can't be successful. You'll see those numbers look the same if we work our butts off to move everyone out of homelessness. If people continue to flow in to the homelessness system, you're going to see those numbers stay the same. It'll look like we're running in place, because one of the key aspects of this whole homelessness response system working is stopping people from becoming homeless. And so this is where, we actually have, we do have a need across all of these. As mentioned, our family shelter is facing lower funds now than we've dealt with in the past. That threatens our ability to pay for moving costs for families, which really helps them to get into housing. So, we do need to be looking across the continuum. And frankly, when we're looking at cost effectiveness, the prevention side of things is frankly less expensive. It does make more sense to ensure that piece is bolstered and strong. And yeah, I think we then start looking down the line. Okay, if someone does lose their house, maybe they're in their car, how do we make sure we also have a place for them to go and get support there? Maybe they've lost their car, now they're camping on the streets. How do we have outreach programs and sheltering programs? And so we really do look across that whole continuum.
One follow-up is, you did actually mention that in the presentation that there's an average cost savings of about 31,000 per person from a Denver study. Could you explain a little bit more? How did that study work? Is it really showing that, when you invest in these preventative services, there's a measurable cost savings for, I guess my question is for for all the jurisdictions? How is that, those savings kind of distributed across the different stakeholders?
Savings. I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand. So more so just in terms of like how we got that study worked in terms of the numbers and whatnot.
Yeah.
So as in terms of the study, it was specific, they look at kind of like the holistic view, and it is older. I don't know if I have it with me right now, so it might end up being something that we have to send to you because we have a citations page. That's also what I plan on emailing y'all. All of these documents are citations that go with it, and then there are other studies. I don't know if I have the Denver study one with me. You worked on that with me.
That one
Um,
either.
But what I would say in terms of this, I can't maybe answer that question right now, but the one thing I will say is Growing Home used to actually be a shelter-based program. So we worked with a lot of our faith-based organizations. We housed people, showered, everything. We did the whole shebang. And we made the decision to shift to prevention because exactly what Delaney said, that kind of inflow is just continuing. We're seeing folks continue to come through there, but we see all of the different needs. So they might come to us for housing, but they might also come with some medical needs. So because there's no maybe insurance and all of these other kind of costs that come with that, but the cost to help them, give them the support they need, whether it be in health, education, that kind of thing, the cost just goes up for us. So we realized that prevention and case management prevention, not just here's your $5,000, go pay your rent. It was moving away from the transactional and honestly moving away from the housing component and how can we do this? Because we also had partners like Almost Home already taking care of the shelter-based pieces. We also have a DV shelter that Family Tree is also supporting. So it was more of, we don't have enough prevention in this county, period, is what we saw. And so as you saw, there were only 4 providers providing in this county actual contracting on rental and mortgage assistance. So it was just a huge need that we saw. We also worked with the county and they did have a report that came out in April 2025 that also talked through, I can't remember exactly who they did this study with, but I can also look at getting that to y'all because it talks through what they were seeing in the entire county by zip codes. And then it was talking through what the recommendations around prevention looks like really in that space. So I can look at getting that to y'all as well because we do have that report. Yes.
And to quick, maybe speak to the, from memory, the pieces that the study is referring to is really those costs that do end up going back to taxpayers around emergency medical services that for uninsured individuals, as well as frankly, like the jail services. Sometimes police, all of those costs have to then go up to make sure that we're appropriately responding to an increase in people who might be on the street and facing various issues. And so we're really looking at, holistically, how much goes back to the taxpayer it does depend on the access to all of these other public services. And actually evictions do have a cost to taxpayers as well. So we have this information and we can make sure that we get it to
I know, I
you
was like, I don't
before
have it on my
that,
new
yeah.
page, but I will get it to you for sure.
Yes, but good question.
Right, 1 second, John. So just to clarify, the council asked to start the meeting. So it was not the city manager's office that decided that this was going to conflict at 5:45. In fact, your ward mate actually suggested we continue to move forward. And I believe you're on the board for Almost Home?
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? So I'm sure you can share additional information too if we needed it.
Yeah.
John?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you both for being here today. Robin, congratulations on your position. You guys Growing Home has it's a great get. So basically I've been fans of you guys for quite a while, since I lived here 7.5 years ago. My volunteer work has been on the food insecurity side of the equation. Of course, Veronica, we talked about that. I won't go into depth here. But still, during my campaign last year, when I talked to neighbors, not just Ward 2, but throughout Thornton, the number one topic on neighbors' minds is what we're talking about right now, homelessness. What are we doing about it? And granted, Community Connections, great job with the homeless outreach team. Now, I told folks about that. Outstanding job. Keep up the great work. But it's very obvious, especially now with the current climate we're in, that we as a community need to do more and our neighbors want us to do more. So I will work with my colleagues on council and with staff on any solution that we come up with. I'm amenable to anything. Obviously, I may have a preference, but obviously we need to have discussions on as to what type, because we do have budget to deal with. But with that being said, we need to do something, and I will work with anyone to ensure that we can. I would love to partner with you guys on a personal note, but it's not about me, it's about our community. So,
Thank you.
but again, thank you for being here.
Any other questions?
I mean,
Sorry.
Let you refer, they haven't spoken yet.
that's not, I don't have a question yet.
Sorry about that. Thanks for being here, by the way. It's good to hear from you. I've been to, I think, one of your fundraisers for organization. What is the funding gap that's coming up?
It's so, yeah.
3 million.
3 million.
Pretty.
For the county though.
2,000, yeah, that's exactly,
That is
it's
it.
2,900,000 something, which is on one of the slides for you all as well. That is just referencing only the TANF contracts that were lost across the county.
Yes.
And so what is your total budget? And then kind of walk me through
Yes.
what's funded for Radford County, and are you totally TANF funded? I mean, what is?
Oh, Growing Home is not. So we're pretty diversified because of the diversification of our programming. So we're a combination of foundations. We have some federal grants, or I will say a federal grant, and then a lot of foundational and honestly, community members, individual donors. So we're pretty diversified. TANF, for us, we were contracted. So when we went out of doing specifically the housing piece with the municipalities, we went, in the contract process with Adams County because they didn't have the infrastructure on that. So we really worked and said, they were like, we trust you to do this. And so we were receiving the largest dollar amount, closer to 1.2 million per year in terms of the funding on that end. So that's why our numbers are a little higher, but we are now in terms of the organization, the rest of our programming is about 3 million. So with TANF, we were about 5 million fiscal. Now we're back to 3. So again, we're resilient, we're longstanding, but 1.1 million really, if you look at that number, it helped with our operations, but 500,000 went directly back into the community on that assistance piece. So yeah.
And similar with Almost Home, our budget was just under 7 million in the last year, and we're closer to the upper 5 millions now. We lost exactly 1 million from the last grant year from TANF, though in the past we had received a little bit more than 1 million. So we had actually been seeing that pull down, saw the writing on the wall. And we actually, on information from the county, had anticipated the loss of the funding to happen this year. So it came in a year early, which is challenging for a nonprofit like ours to quickly make up that difference. And of course, so now we're just here a bit earlier than we expected. But our funds also come from a lot of different sources. The issue here is that this is one of our largest single granting sources. So, I mean, last year we got 13 new grants that we've never gotten before. Not a single one was more than 20,000. So it's great, but it's also, I mean, it takes just the amount of overhead and the amount of, grinding it out on the admin side to just sort of get close to the 1 million that we were efficiently moving is unfortunate.
Because there are a lot of restrictions that went with the money as well, because it was federal dollars. And so our case managers track all that, and we have there's a lot of value that has to go into the systems that we do. But yeah, it was a pretty big shift, but as Delaney mentioned, it was a quick shift, so there wasn't planning that was able to be done.
Okay, thank you. Are you one of the recipients of the Thornton Assistance Fund grants?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Yes. I was like, I think we get something like 15 maybe. Yeah.
on the piggyback on that, you've applied for grants for Thornton Assistance Funds for this year too, right?
You got it. Yes.
I'm pretty sure I will talk to Robin. But yes.
Great, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Actually, I believe, I want to say the application, I know there was a suggested due date and then like a real due date, and we gonna get it in by the real due date. Financials, it's been a thing to
It's been
get
a really
over.
interesting year.
Been an interesting.
As you'll know, because
Ashley
you're
is
doing
great,
budget.
By the way, and I have a meeting with Ashley this week to look at several different options for some funding.
Justin?
Oh, yeah. You know, the council in the last quarter or so, 3 to 4 months, we've been discussing solutions or ideas on, you know, our desire to enhance our services when it comes to homelessness, housing, people who are really struggling in our city. And you know, Councilmember Allergy hit it on the head. You know, he's out there directly talking to the community, and as he said, this is the will of our community. We have people throughout our entire city who want to help out, and they're asking us as leaders to step up and help. And so I was a bit disappointed when the conversation began about back 4 or 5 months ago about the home housing situation, homelessness, and nothing showed up in our budget about, you know, it was very minimal. In fact, the thing that sticks out in my mind most is we upped our abatement funds by $150,000 to somewhere around 400. I could be off on that number, but I know that was proposed and approved to increase our abatement process. So the city is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on cleaning up encampments, and I project that to get worse because of the data that we've seen here tonight. And y'all have mentioned that these types of investments are ways to mitigate costs. Well, that's one manifestation of the cost. And who knows how much else it costs the city of Thornton when it comes to emergency response, right? You made that point really well, and I would love, it'd be great if we could figure that out. I'm not sure we're able to, as a city, to really link those two.
We use the Arizona eviction, so it's a little bit different because it's more about the cost of evictions, but what is it, the University of Arizona eviction
Mhm.
calculator? Where's it?
Yeah, it might not be, it might be the screenshot on there.
You can use to, you know. put in
There are
specific
tools
information
that
about
you
it.
can go and see kind of some estimates, some averaging and whatnot. So
Yes.
there are
we can-
some tools, but University of Arizona definitely has probably the most up-to-date one that you could
Yeah.
utilize.
Yeah, and so I see,
Mhm.
well, it's an unfortunate situation with the federal funding, but it's also presents itself as an opportunity, as potential strategy for Thornton to take to meet its own objectives that we've already had discussions at length. And so I would like to ask the council for consensus on directing our staff to coordinate with you to come up with 3 different potential scenarios of investment that we could do. Now, granted, we're probably not gonna cover all of it, right? And nor should we, because we're not the whole county. But I do think that this is a potential avenue for our city to go and meet the goals that we've already discussed and had consensus on. And I'd like to see some potential options that we could take when it comes to homelessness prevention. And I think a big part of this is strengthening the partnership with our community partners, like Almost Home and Growing Home, because you are the experts and you have the case managers who are on the ground and meet with the people who need it most. And so I see this a way to leverage your expertise and meet the goals that the residents are mandating us. So that's my question for the councils, if we have consensus to take that direction to the staff.
A quick question.
Okay, I have Roberta. Is yours based on what Justin is saying, or you have something different?
Yeah.
Okay, Roberta, then Drew.
Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. What Councilmember Algie said is definitely true, and we have many folks in our community that are concerned about homelessness. Often it comes from a place of frustration because of the encampment situation. It's still very difficult in our community for folks to understand that, you know, you have this spectrum of what happens from, like you all are saying, the beginning to Z, where you have people in encampments, and that they see that end result, and that's what's often frustrated to folks when you're knocking on doors. And I think a great deal of our conversations that need to occur is with changing hearts and minds around how do we prevent it, right? And that's still a huge conversation that I think our community needs to have, we need to have in our city. But what I've said numerous times in these meetings is like, organizations like y'all are a part of the puzzle. A big part of the budget piece is our county. We have to be realistic about that. Like our city can't foot a bill on a lot of this stuff. So I definitely agree with council member Martinez that we need to have a conversation about this, but I think it needs to be with organizations like y'all and our county and possibly other organizations, because we can't get to a place of prevention of homelessness until we have real conversations about how it occurs and getting more people, especially in the homes of Thornton, understanding how that actually happens. Because I love to say that the folks that Councilmember LG just talked to this campaign season were really always coming from a place of like understanding that beginning process, but often it comes more from a place of like, I was walking my dog and I saw this, or I was driving to the grocery store and I saw shopping carts. And it's not really coming from that place of like the holistic understanding of what's going on. So I love the idea of that. I just want to make sure that we're utilizing the correct revenue streams and organizations. And I definitely think you all are part of that. But that's kind of what my take is on the whole situation.
No, appreciate that. Thank you. I do know that the counties, who we've been in contact with them, and unfortunately, there isn't going to be funds for this year around that. But again, budget squeeze is honestly happening across the board, and we see it, right? And so I know that they've done some rapid rehousing. I believe they spent about $1 million on rapidly rehousing 7 folks. I want to say it was last year in 2024. And so we've also provided some intel around, hey, rapid rehousing actually is not the best way to go. And so again, I think it just really comes back to, like you said, partnering, talking to each other and seeing how can we all kind of make this work, because it is a huge puzzle. It is.
Yeah, because I think it's more like where do we invest money to get those conversations going in the right direction? Because we can just put money towards, these different things that are going on or different programs, but we give you guys money and it's just like chipping away at a giant iceberg. We're never gonna get there if we don't.
There needs to be a
really
more
change
structure.
Yeah, if we don't change hearts and minds around how this is occurring. And again, it kind of goes back to the whole conversation we had last year about Carpenter Rec Center and how that was like, okay, we solved this problem, but we still have like this big problem and it's not solving it. So I want to just kind of like maybe visit that as like, because you guys are saying that, the rapid housing.
It only affected 7 people total for $1
Yeah.
million. And so if you
Yeah.
kind of do the math in that end, and then I do work with Dr. Cog's housing team as well. So I'm on the regional housing team as well. And we've been having these conversations for 3 years as well, because we saw the writing on the wall. And so they've done some work, but I think Adams County is in just really unique position of rapidly growing, but also having kind of some of the basic income of the folks that are coming to our area just isn't in a higher bracket. And so when we're seeing that base
And our proximity to Denver too.
Exactly.
Yeah, where people can just go on a bus right up north and they're in Thornton and they're in Adams County. So,
Exactly.
all
And
right.
so we're just in this really interesting situation. as
Yeah.
Adams County.
And I'll just add that I think it would be helpful as we look to the future to all be in conversations. That is greatly our desire, is to not just be talking, to
Individually.
one municipality at a time, but, have the county be involved and really us all be working together for a future planning vision, I think.
That is the biggest piece.
Before I was on council, they started that conversation and it happened one time in North Glen, I guess. And then we still haven't, we haven't continued that conversation. And it's frustrating because
We would love that. We've been asking for that, so we would love that.
the city of Thornton's big, but I mean, we invited the commissioners here, they all came and we had a conversation. And I think we need to pick up on that because they should be leading this conversation in Adams County about how we can, change hearts and minds
The
around
leadership
issue.
summit coming up.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Drew?
Yeah, so I'm curious, maybe if you do provide proposals of,
Okay.
of options, we'll say. I'm interested to hear what like the homeless outreach team in Thornton,
Yeah.
how we work, with you. And also, what are other, what does it look like in the past or currently, like what other faith-based organizations are you partnering with?
Yeah.
And maybe like what specifically those organizations are helping tackle with you, whether it's funding or if it's a specific need or, you know, whatever it is. And because it'd be really interesting to see what those gaps are and just what numbers of, because there are plenty of faith-based organizations in our city, in our county that are looking for things to be a part of
For sure.
and help solve problems
Yeah.
in our community, and they want to help and fund some of that. So
That's a really
Also
good idea.
Rotaries, in all honesty. So we've went to North Grand Rotary, Westminster Rotary. Rotaries are very interested in how they can also support. So
I think there's a huge network that we can really engage that, like, if the city can't fund, you know, more than like our TAF grants, then we know there's others, and that'd be a conversation I would love to be a part of and to help make those connections.
no, we would honestly, like I said, we came here in partnership because it really is, since June, we've been trying to think, what are we gonna do? And we've already seen kind of things devolve over the last 6 months since then. And I don't really see that kind of wrapping into a nice pretty bow by the end of the 2026.
Right.
So
Yeah.
To answer your question about the homeless outreach team as well, they are one of our SWAP partners. So they actually do all of the Thornton intakes for the severe weather activation program for Thornton Nights. So
So we just had one last weekend.
we
where
sure
had
did, and we're probably gonna have one
center.
tomorrow.
So they're the ones kind of manning that.
Exactly. And so we basically Almost Home, we operate the program, we provide like gap support. So let's say, you know, the team's out at a conference and they're like, you guys got to do Thornton for us. We're like, no worries, we got you. Or if they're have 5 rooms they weren't able to fill, we can help support that. But we want to also have the municipalities have the ability to connect their people with the resource directly without also having to go through the middleman of Almost Home when that's
Yeah.
not appropriate. So we tend to, we're more of like that, the assist on the hot team when it comes to shelter and when it comes to outreach needs. There are some times where the hot team gets close to housing someone, they'll then put them into our respite program. So they can like have them in one place for the 2 weeks so they can get into the apartment successfully. Or, you know, they're like reaching out to us about, oh, do you guys have any resources for cars and whatever. So we have a, what's it called? Slack channel, you know, we chat.
Yeah.
So that is a very close and wonderful relationship. I love the hot team. And the other piece with faith-based organizations, we do get kind of that piecemeal support. So we've got some amazing churches who are doing drives, who even do maybe large monthly donations where their congregation is coming together. But I'm very interested in how we can link them together. I mean, you know, all these organizations who are kind of doing their own thing, can we bring them together toward a solution?
Yeah, I came across a group, and they're a faith-based organization, but they're kind of what they're trying to do is fill a gap with churches, essentially, and needs in the community, and they act as that conduit. And so they would be a really interesting connection.
Honestly,
I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I
love
can-
that because it's part of what we've also been talking through because some of my board members are pretty active in their churches as well. And they do very similar, like we said, the drives, the larger, you know, kind of congregation donations. And they're saying, throw me in, coach, like, what can I do to help? Like they want to do this as well. So it's almost like again, we're kind of piecemealing because it's us and we do have a cohort of other nonprofits in the Adams County area that we meet with every other week. So we've done some of that work already around housing just because again, we saw the need and as organizations, we're all trying to think about how are we going to do this because it's not just our organization, it's our participants, it's our community, it's our staff members, it's everybody that's going to be affected by this in the long term.
And I know, Justin, you had asked a question. I think we have the strategic planning retreat coming up soon. We have the leadership summing up coming up soon. How many are going to be able to attend that leadership summit?
Which Adams County one?
Adams
Adams County
Yeah,
one?
signed up.
Yeah, the Metro Mayor's Caucus retreat is the same day, so I can't go, but if we can have enough representation from Thornton, I
Yeah.
think there's an opportunity there to start that conversation and then bring it to our retreat the next week and talk about what opportunities we have. You can't change the budget this
Yeah.
quickly in the beginning of the year, but there may be some opportunities for strategy to figure out.
Because that's
things that
what we're
we
here
can
for,
make.
honestly. And then again, like we said, is there advocacy that Growing Home, we are gonna have our first advocacy day this year in February at the state level. So we're doing some fun stuff around that. But again, and it's not just our organization, it'll be other organizations and community members that are joining us.
I
So
think you're hearing a passion from all of us as well.
Thank you for clarifying, that's not exactly what my request was, to see if there's consensus to get the staff coordinating with these two organizations immediately, so they can start putting together feasibility of 3 different options that may or may not be possible. That work could then be brought to us at strategic planning conference or whenever. And if need be, if the council decides the urgency of this, we can do a budget amendment, or we can wait to the budget. But I think that the urgency is clear, and that waiting around to the strategic conference or some other meeting is not what I'm asking. I'm asking us to make a consensus decision tonight to get the ball rolling.
Just to hear proposals.
Yes.
And I want to be super careful too, that we're not advocating, I want to be careful how I say this, to bring additional funding to an organization where you sit on the board with a potential conflict. And so I appreciate you bringing it forward and appreciate the information, but there may be some opportunity to get some additional information with the Adams County leadership that's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and ours that's in right after that. It's not waiting months, it is going pretty quickly.
Well, I think my request was clear, but now I'll ask the city attorney if my seat on the board presents a conflict of interest, given I have no financial stake, there's no public hearings involved. What's your take on that?
Right, so we have had members of council sit on nonprofit boards before, and because they do not have a direct financial interest in what is going on, you're not benefiting financially personally, we have not found the conflict to exist.
So again, I think my request was clear, and I think we should ask if there is consensus tonight.
Where is it consensus at?
I think, would you clarify?
Yeah, I'll clarify. I would like to see if there is consensus to give our staff direction to start coordinating with Almost Home and Growing Home to look at the feasibility of potential financial assistance towards the programs of eviction assistance. And to present those findings to council as soon as possible, so we can make an informed decision on whether it's one, feasible to help financially in this urgent crisis, and 2, how much or what kind of help would be available given the staff's professional work with the 2 nonprofits.
Thoughts from the council?
I have no problem from that. It's just gathering information. And if we start sooner, can't hurt. You know, information gathering. I don't have an issue with that.
I'm good with information gathering as well. Let's leave it at that.
Is there any objection?
My only concern would be the sense of urgency that's being put behind it. I understand where you're coming from, Justin, but I also want to make sure that we're not pushing a priority above other things that are necessary for the city to be involved in and kind of pushing forward. If it's a top priority, then that's a different situation than a, hey, let's work together and kind of get this going, but it's not a, we need this in a 1 week kind of time frame. So my only concern is what is the true sense of urgency and what's the time frame for the end result supposed to be looking like?
You want to clarify, Justin?
Oh, yes, good point, Councilmember Byrd, and I think that the sense of urgency is for the council to decide into how we prioritize it. We can't begin to do that seriously without further information and understanding what exactly, what decisions we're making, what kind of financial numbers there are, and how it impacts our trade-offs that we have to make further down the road, as you mentioned. And so we need our staff to take the lead in working with the nonprofits to collect the information so that we are empowered to make a decision based off of all the information that's out there. And then I think we'll be able to determine as a council, the sense of urgency and the priority. But I do think given my personal opinion is given what we've heard from the voters, what we've heard from the nonprofits and our own experiences, that there's enough urgency to ask the staff to do a little bit of work on this.
And I agree. I'm not disagreeing with that aspect of it. My disagreement was with the urgency that's being put on the staff to come up with those scenarios.
To clarify, you were asking Almost Home to produce those
Well, we can't give direction to Almost Home. I'm asking our staff to work. That my ask is to give direction, which is what we will need a consensus from this council to give our staff direction on work to be done. That's what I'm asking.
I got Roberta and then Chris.
I guess my question is, what would be the end product we're looking for out of this work? And then the second thing would be, are there other organizations and other governmental entities that need to be part of the conversations?
A list of other organizations actually that would really be valuable at coming to the table. That we could also get you that have already been involved. You might have it on your sheet, but we have, yes. So we have Family Tree that would be willing, Committee's Crisis Center, Community Economic Defense Project, the Bell Policy, Colorado Poverty Law, Adams 12 5 Stars willing, Westminster Public School Foundation, Colorado Fiscal Institute. These are other orgs that have said, hey, let's come to the table. And that we're connected with regularly. And there are also more in that slate as well that we are really just don't have the capacity to do what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
This is
so we
here.
could pull them in, as Veronica mentioned, we
Yeah.
meet regularly, so if we knew, specifically what
What
to
y'all need.
provide, we could kind of manage that on our side with the partners.
Okay, so you would have those partners, and what would be the end result we'd be looking at getting here?
I guess it's what end result do y'all want? Because
Yeah,
that's what
well,
I'm hearing.
My request for the end result would be to have, I said 3, but a number of options for the council to discuss that have specific numbers in terms of financial contributions, what programs we would be contributing to, what programs, how many people in Thornton would be affected by those programs. Those types of details that take some effort and coordination between the nonprofits, our staff, and the other partners that you mentioned, if available. Basically, information that will help empower this council to make a decision on whether we are able to and want to provide the assistance that Almost Home and Growing Home are asking for.
Okay, so I feel like this is good work. My concern again is that the county is the entity with the human services budget. And we have it in our charter that we are per our charter, we are to be working with the county in order to provide these services. Now, we do provide funding in some limitation because our budget, it has constraints in how much of that we can contribute. So I am, totally open to that. It's just that I want to be careful that we're not opening up this precedence setting budget kind of window where we're the largest city in Adams County, and then we start funding things. And you all just mentioned from your practice, the county didn't make some of the greatest decisions on how they spent that $1 million that they had for 7 people. So I know we can't, basically we have some leverage to say some things to the county, but again, I feel like we need to have this bigger conversation with other governmental entities because we have North Glen, we have Adams County, we have Westminster, Brighton, we have a ton of different cities that need to be part of this. So I want to have these conversations, but I think it's just very much in a silo if it's just Thornton working with organizations. This is the work the county's supposed to be doing. So I guess my bigger question is what work are they doing? So if we could have maybe our staff, I feel like I've already done this. Let's just rewind it. Let's have them bring the county back and bring the, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel you in that we have not also seen movement.
And we started with the
And
county,
don't-
to be honest. That's who we started with. And just given the shifts that they needed to make, and we dissected their budget that they just approved. And unfortunately, I think there's not gonna be any changes to that coming. And we would absolutely love to work all together with different municipalities, to be honest, get us all in the same room, because we have literally been making the rounds. And we're hearing the same thing from honestly many councils.
And
And
it's helpful for the county to know that
Well, then
that
maybe
is.
we can Letter to the county and ask them to come again, and we have these conversations and we ask what the work is being done
we would
as a
absolutely do
coalition,
that.
because I just don't think it's productive for Thornton to have a conversation with organizations in a silo again, and what are we gonna do? Are we gonna create budget lines for this when we've never had those budget lines, and per our charter, we're not expected to? When we have taxpayers in the city of Thornton paying tons of taxes to Adams County, and we're not seeing any movement in this, because this is our responsibility, but it's also the county. So I feel like our position here, and you're talking, for my buddy John here too, is like, he knocked tons of doors and heard this all the time. And he wants to help, but it's not fair that it's all put on our shoulders now, because we're the only ones that are listening to the conversation, it feels like. So
Well, other municipalities have had
I know
similar
they are.
reactions, and so I think it is one of those things that if worst case scenario, it's not, movement's not happening, we did want to kind of offer an option to
Municipalities.
protect Thornton residents in a way that would be, specific to your city.
Mhm.
And of course, a way when Adams County, it's
Yeah.
more general. And so again, I see it as a yes and. There's almost like a short-term, long-term strategy.
We've looked
Where
at
short-term, we're gonna see the impacts hit now before anything is going to be able to come out of the
just
county.
thinking out loud, what work can we do as the city, what work can we do with Growing Home and other nonprofit organizations to bring this coalition together, I think is a better question, because I think we could look at putting little chunks of our budget, but it's not gonna fix that problem that you're talking about. We're not gonna have a budget line next year that, homelessness is solved.
Yeah.
We stopped having people getting kicked out of their houses. I
I
think
did
it's.
work with the city of Westminster about 2 years ago, and they were trying to do something similar, but I think things got caught up in the attorney's office, unfortunately, because of the contracting. And so it ended up being, they put about $300,000 toward rental and mortgage assistance, and we worked with them. We contracted it, but the RFP didn't get approved. I think it was until November, and they needed the funds expelled by December 31st. And it was like $300,000 is really hard to move
Yeah.
with this short amount of time. Yes, we have that infrastructure and we were able to make the movement, but I think because they, very similar to this municipality, is like, what do we do, right? For our folks in this city, but the timeline was really short. And so had we had that over a year, man, we could have really made that work. And we still got through with the 10 families, and different organizations kind of did that. But because of how short term it was, I think that it was like, oh, that didn't work, and so we're gonna try something different. And it was like, no, this can work. But $300K in 2 months is really challenging with
Doing it.
us providing 3 months of case management, and you're only giving us 2. And so again, I think it's the conversations. It's like you said also, we don't have all the information, so how can we get together to get all the information and truly just collaborate? That is the biggest piece, because we, as Delaney said, we've heard this from several municipalities, and it is the same thing. They're saying the same thing. Why are we, instead of the county, responsible for this? When, Adams County Human Services does have 15 million in the reserve, right? And so we're hearing this, and it's the education component too, because we have not seen movement since June.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not an either or
Yeah,
situation.
it's a both and.
Already asked our staff to start working with Adams County and looking at those ways, and I'd love to hear where we are in that in the near future. And so it's not just like, one or the other. I'm talking about, we need to take leadership. We can't just sit around pointing our fingers at the other municipalities and the other jurisdictions, the county, while people are out there getting evicted. And I know we can't solve the problem. We're not in a position, Adams County is in a position to solve the problem. But if we are able to help in any way, I think it's worth exploring. And that was my request, is to identify, are we even able to help out? And if so, what does that mean for the city? And so that doesn't mean it has to happen in a bubble where we're abandoning our approach by building a coalition with the county. Yes, the county is supposed to be leading the way on this, but the fact is they're not. They made their budget prioritizations and they're leaving these people out in the cold, literally. And so when that happens, I can't in good conscience sit by and not even investigate what kind of opportunities they are, even if it only helps a handful of people. At the very least, it can help some people avoid eviction, and it sends a signal that the city of Thornton has leaders who truly care and are willing to take action, and take bold action when it comes to helping those people in response to the voters' will. And so, no, I don't think it's enough to write a letter or point our finger at the county and say it's your job. I think the real leadership is going to require taking action on that. So that's why I'm asking for this. A very basic thing is to gather more information.
Chris?
I'm gonna go on a few here. First Saturday, January 24th is that ADCO summit. I don't know if there's someone you guys can speak to be there, but it's gonna be the electeds and leadership of all of Adams
That'd be
County.
wonderful.
So
Yeah.
that is your, if you can get in there, that would be another opportunity to talk to all of us at once. And we've talked about it, but no one's giving you the actual date so that you can.
And our staff can coordinate and get that information to
I
you.
don't know if we're allowed, but we can try.
We would love to be there. In all honesty, we will prioritize it. It is just, how do we share? Because we're also getting asked by our community members, what is happening in the county? They're asking us, hey, this program went away. What's the county doing? And we're like, we can share that eventually when we get that information. So it's people asking for this information too. And we're just kind of at this
It's a
point.
full day, 9 to 5 type
Okay.
summit, so
Okay.
I assure you there will be talks about the unhoused and what we can do during that day. Even if it's not an opportunity for you to present, I would encourage the opportunity that maybe to be the consultant, because it's a bunch of electeds like this room.
Yep.
And if nothing else, you can chime in and say, here's the data that you're asking about.
Just answer
Yeah.
questions if they
Answer
arise.
questions.
Yeah.
It's a unified format of all the elected, so the
Thank you.
24th, that's, I
Okay.
think, the
Thank you
information
so
that
much.
we've talked circles around, but we never told you. Second, the reason why I think the consensus asked from Councilmember Martinez is to adhere to that timeline, that being on the 24th and then our retreat being on the 30th and 31st. I don't see the harm in starting to look into or preparing some of that information so that we can discuss, is this a budget line item? Is this going to be a priority for the future? I know that's not what you want, but we don't know what that number is until we get there. Abatement wasn't supposed to be a line item on our city's budget when the charter was formed, but we have 400,000 going to that. So getting information, I feel, is a pretty harmless thing, but a very beneficial tool, since we're going to spend 48 hours with each other at our retreat. And if we've got some numbers, maybe it's 50 or 100,000. I don't know what that number is, but there's an opportunity then. At least we know what we're working with, and perhaps maybe it is something we can work in the budget. And the reason why I would seek that information is from my third point, is you talked about the rapid rehousing and how that serves 7 households, not 7 people, for $1 million. But at the same time, then we can kind of take a look at, and you can provide this later, the information that I'm gonna ask for right now, but that is, what is the breakdown for those services? And how do they, what is the, that they provide as far as the greatest return on investment through the people served? Clearly, 7 households for $1 million, it's not a very good ROI. But if we were to say the food pantry is something that, that same $1 million could service 500 families.
Yeah.
Then I think that's where we start to focus.
Yeah.
If at that retreat, or if we do come up with the ability to help assist the organizations, we only have 100,000. We got to stretch that as far and have the greatest reach possible. I don't know those numbers though. So what are the most effective services, and where we can contribute whatever that dollar amount is? Dollar amount may be 0 for now, but at least then we know what we're striving for and what we could potentially look at in our future budgets.
Like a
So-
per household.
Yeah, per
sort of
household amount or something.
You can scale it based off of.
Rapid
There are also
rehousing
some
doesn't
other
sound like-
pieces like around there are some red tape around rental and mortgage assistance. And so some of the things that we've done in our other programming is, okay, we might not pay that, but we'll pay for that car repair instead so that you can pay your rent.
Perfect.
So
Because
things
if
like
you get
that.
to work, you
Yeah.
can make money. If your car breaks down, you
Exactly.
can't get to work.
Exactly.
Those are the very specifics that I think would be very beneficial.
great.
So I know I've kind of given a lot of direction in my 5 minutes talking here, but I think that's how we connect all the pieces where you need to be, the information that we need, the information as a council that we should request. So that way we make our meeting times later this month more or the most effective. Again, none of this means we're making decisions, but all these pieces of information, I think, educate us to a point where we can at least have a conversation and consider, maybe not even this year, maybe it's next year. But if abatement's gonna keep going up and we're gonna keep adding 150,000 a month, telling the county, hey, this is your job, well, maybe we can bring, instead of increasing abatement 150,000 year over year, maybe that money is better served because we will see the ROI on services. We can reduce abatement that way or spend the money more wisely. Sorry to go on a tangent. I was
totally
really
understand.
long time. So I had like a half page here and I think.
You're great. Thank you.
Well, I want to remember it all, so I was writing it down, but thank you.
And if I could add something really quickly, since we're talking about the 1 million in rapid rehousing, Almost Home is the provider for that. So I feel the need to kind of defend what's going on there. So this is an encampment direct to housing resolution program. We're talking about our most challenging, most visible, most difficult to house, been homeless for years and years, frankly, don't even want to be housed.
Yeah.
We're going to the encampment saying, you're either leaving by force or we're housing you. And that's the 7
Yeah.
people. So they've been our highest challenge participants. And it's something to kind of really underscore, like, you do not want people to get there all the way down to the road where it takes $1 million to rehouse 7 people, because that is what happens when someone's unhoused for
A very long time.
the majority of their life, and who've built their lives around surviving the streets. They need a lot more support to actually be able to thrive in housing, because that's not, so anyway, all that's to
Thank you.
say, it's not
Your typical, like, a family that might need some rental assistance. These are the most visible
And
people that you see.
And I still agree, it's not the best use of funds. Frankly, it's because people don't like to see it. And so they're like, whatever, I'll spend the money to not see this anymore. So it is what it is, but that's the piece to
Rebecca,
clarify.
I reply to your idea of saying that, how do we educate our community? And I am a Thornton resident, by the way. And what I can say is, I hear from people and our neighbors in the next or up of, people not wanting to see it in their face. But what I can say is that there are so many caring people in our community. Anytime that you've ever needed anything, our community comes out. It is full of a lot of people with big hearts. So I think an opportunity of those food drives in our homeowners associations and our PTOs, where we also put in information. Now, don't just do a food drive, but giving those people education for how we help people on the long term. That's how we get to them. Make it a fundraiser, make it fun, giving back, but also educating.
And mutual aid too, which are projects that are,
Huge component.
and it's something I've done a lot of, studying on and I've participated in, and it's not something that's easily practiced because people go right away into charity and those types
Let
of
me
things.
help
Not
you.
our model.
But the mutual aid projects definitely do help, but these are things that are like re-education of a population that just don't understand the concepts. And so
Yes.
I think it's like changing, like I said, hearts and minds in a community. That kind of like deeper kind of sociological change is really what helps these situations in the long term.
No, appreciate that.
So I think Chris did a great job of clarifying the ask so that it's not necessarily just a proposal. It is actually data to help us with some of those decision makings. So given that clarification, is there any objection to that, gathering that data? I would ask again, as you're at the leadership summit, I mean, we can get you the invite so you know where it is, what time it starts and all the things. Even if you just sit in the back of the room, it's going to be an open meeting because you got all the elected officials there. So you have to be able to be there by law. So you can observe even if you can't participate. But I think that would be helpful to have you there and to have as much data as possible so that this group can help advocate
And we can
for
really
those
work for
things.
that.
Yeah.
And so we'll be very specific. The other piece that, like I said, we've been making the rounds to different municipalities. So we also have one pagers for many different municipalities on what the impact looks like as well. So
Right.
we
can bring it all.
We can bring it all. And again, I 100% agree. As I've been doing this since June, but much earlier, but when the, hit the fan, education was a huge component that I realized was not out there. Folks were really unaware of what was happening. So I think it's the right move for sure.
I just want to clarify, because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we go out. There's been a lot of conversation and wanted to make sure I might have interpreted Councilmember Russell's comments differently. So I just want to make sure, the original request was to work with Almost Home on 3 funding proposals. And I wasn't clear whether that was to come at your retreat or at a planning session. I understood from your comments to try to understand the efficiency of the programs those would fund and how they would serve individuals.
It's both.
Both, right?
You guys have the information on how the dollar affects or is stretched the farthest to provide the most gain. I think you could probably readily have that with staff.
We do have some of that.
We have a lot of this already to give to you.
Perfect. And then with that, it gives us 22 days essentially for our staff, just piggybacking off Justin's request. Then at least, all right, we spare 50 grand, and we spare 100 grand. If not this year, next year, where do we allocate? But we don't know how to use those dollars to their highest and best use. And we also don't know what the number of what we could spare if we made that decision. We're gonna have a lot of time together, so even if it's 30 minutes at the retreat, that maybe we're able to discuss that. I think bringing those 2 pieces of information together, we'll at least know what Thornton's position is. And we can't assume the county or the other cities, but if we're gonna do something ourselves, at least we know what that cost is and how far the reach would be with those dollars. Maybe we do nothing, but we can do our due diligence. Westminster can have the same task at the summit. I assure you, I'm gonna have the same request of every city, because most of us here know everybody in every single city. And if they could do the same thing, then maybe we know as a county, each individual city has 25,000 or 50,000 here. And we already know the most resourceful way to spend that money. And then at some point throughout the year, if we do budget amendments, we can pull all that money in conjunction with what the county can or can't spare. And maybe it's $500,000 that we raise, but we'll know how to spend that the most efficient way.
Yep.
Those are the reasons and why I think getting the information is a little bit quicker. It puts, I know our staff and your staff backs against the wall time-wise. That's not the intent. But we also don't want to miss the opportunity of not just having the summit and not having the conversations at our retreat. If we can just roll up our sleeves and work really quickly on this, I will gladly speak at the summit, and I will gladly speak, we'll all be talking already at our retreat, but I think it better positions us for what may come throughout the year. And that's a constructive way and a task-driven way of telling every city, Westminster, Common City, everybody, just do these same steps and just what can you spare? And this is how we can reach the most people. And then we can collaborate on those funds, or within each city, maybe we only spend that 50 or 100,000 on those projects. But we're moving the needle at the same time simultaneously as Westminster and Fed Heights. And then now, instead of one person pushing that rock, we're all pushing the rock at the same time. And that's the kind of visionary type approach that I think could happen.
That's what we've been wanting
So
to see. So thank you.
it's a good request by
Yeah,
Justin,
it
but
is.
I think it wasn't articulated well enough as to why there's a sense of urgency. It's definitely not a commitment on us, but it's very valuable information that we can present at these upcoming meetings. To put a team effort out there instead of individualized efforts and pointing fingers at the county, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I would
Thank
just
you.
say I forwarded you guys the meeting information.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
email
you.
it to you.
Thank you so much.
So I just want to share a little bit of a practical concern about timing. If the goal is to get a report before the January 24th summit, that means your very next planning session on January 20th. This would need to be included, and we would essentially need all the information from your agenda for that will go out next Thursday. So
Can it be an
this
email?
is- we could send a separate email with a static report to you before January
How about this
20th.
then? How about once you actually, we're not in this room, and you guys can actually have some collaborative conversation with.
Okay,
management
I just
here.
want to set expectations because
I
January
appreciate-
January
so-
20th would be your only planning session.
My original request was not that urgent. I was
Okay.
just saying, in the near future, right, my point was not waiting until the budget in the fall, but, so, you know, my original request was get started now and take the time you need to take on it. It'd be great if we had it early, as soon as possible, but I totally get the logistics.
If there's a request to get some piece of information, we will get as much before January 24th. We will get what we can get to
Then
you
that would be
before.
my request then for his consensus. I don't think it's necessary that we get specifics. I think it's necessary that we get high level. It's a range even of 50 to 100,000. Maybe we could work into our budget somewhere along the lines, if not this year, next year. And then with the information they provide, it's not we don't need it to be very deep. I'm not asking for it to be very detailed. And I like the suggestion that the mayor just made, even if it's an email. Hey, we think we could find 50 grand. And then at least now we know which services are. So just very general information, not specific. I'm not gonna bury you guys in a PowerPoint. We don't need to incorporate it in slides. It's just an email that should go to all of us and give us a little direction on what type of dollars we could be working with.
And I just have, sorry, but this is a quick turnaround, so I just want to be really clear with expectations. And so I think that initially the request was funding proposals specifically for Almost Home and Growing Home. And then I think there was a recognition there are other housing providers also impacted by TANF. Is the expectation that we'll work to also include funding allocations for those other, I think you all mentioned several other
We can
organizations.
provide like one,
We could provide that piece.
like a collaborative.
I'm more asking the council. I'm just not as clear on that thread.
Yeah, that's
of
what I wasn't clear,
conversation.
because I thought we had said other organizations could be involved, and then I was also concerned about, I just think we need to know what the county's spending now on this specific issue and how that specific spending is maybe at effective or not as effective as you all would want. Because like, if we're gonna put any type of budgetary line items together for our city, I mean, we obviously want to have the most bang for the buck as far as like, you know, bigger systems changes as opposed to like what y'all were saying earlier. So
In your
that's,
in your backup, we did provide a chart of the TANF funding. So Family Tree and Comitas appear to be the other.
Family Tree is still retaining theirs, just an FYI. So they're retaining it because they have the only DV shelter. So they're retaining that funding through the end of 2026.
Just the DV.
Yeah, just the
Not
DV,
for-
nothing else, no housing. So
No.
just for sheltering for DV. There, yeah, there's some weird changes. And then nurse practice partnership, I think, but is that the county?
So to reiterate your question real quick, you were asking about all organizations.
I just was not clear if the funding request was meant to be for these two or for all of the impacted housing. And there was a conversation about making the request more comprehensive. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what the expectation was.
If I'm modifying Justin's, let's keep it smaller so that we have a starting point. We have a ton of data in which they can tell us how to maximize the dollar spent. So maybe just keep that collaboration small in city staff
Okay.
and their organizations. And let's do that as a starting point. If the more organizations we add in, I already know that number is going up. So if we can
And we're
move the
talking
needle
with
1
them.
degree this year or next year with a few bucks, then this is a great starting point in my opinion. And we can feather in the rest as we continue to get this process going and other municipalities get on board with maybe this idea. And we can grow from there, but for the purpose of keeping it simple, and I don't think his request or what I'm trying to do is to bury anybody. Maybe a few hours just to get some real high level type numbers where it can be the most effective. And we'll start with their organization because they're here presenting to us. They've made the round of all municipalities and that effort deserves the highest priority. I haven't heard from the organizations not to demeanor or minimize their efforts, but we're talking one organization, two organizations this evening. Let's just start there. And then we'll expand if that's even possible.
And then, sorry, last, I promise, last clarifying question is, so I'm understanding that some of the other questions that were asked by other council members was to understand potential sources and trade-offs of some of these proposals. So just want to be clear, is this an assumption that this is a one-time funding allocation or a long-term funding commitment? Because that will impact our financial analysis.
I think that's more of a strategic discussion at the retreat. I don't know if that's something we can do tonight.
I guess the best way to sum up where the sentiment of what I was saying is I want to get started on narrowing the scope of the problem to within the bounds of reality of what we can do. The problem that was presented to us, the problem at hand is the county TANF funds are gone, billions of dollars. It's a huge scope. We all agree we cannot just step in and be the county, nor should we. That's clear. But if we want, I think we all want to help, but we don't know how. And to do that, we have to narrow the scope and define the problem in the context that is feasible and makes sense with what the city of Thornton can do. And those are the main crux of the question that we need answers to. The council cannot do that alone. We need the help of the staff. That was why I asked for the consensus to give direction on that. And so, yeah, Councilmember Russ was right. It maybe wasn't clear at the beginning, but I think the conversation itself was very valuable in kind of getting us to the point of what we're trying to do. We all want to help. We want to know how we can help. We can't get there with even a realistic question, right? All the questions that we ask are yes, no votes. Yes, do we spend money? No, do we not? We can't get there without narrowing the scope and understanding the problem within the context of the city of Thornton.
Okay, so I think just because I want to set some expectations about what you'll see. So as we look at some of these funding allocations, we will both try to outline, here's some of the implications or trade-offs if this is a one-time allocation. Here's the consequences if there's an expectation this would be a reoccurring expense. So we can, given that that isn't, the request is not certain in that regard, we'll try to outline it in both kind of circumstances. Is that helpful?
Very helpful, and I would say like anything we get back from you will help move it forward into helping the council make a decision on whether this is something we can or should do or not. We don't know yet. We need help.
Okay, this is helpful. We will prepare what we can ahead of your summit on the 24th.
Devin, did you want to add anything?
My only request is that when you come up with, hey, we have this 50,000 or this 100,000, whatever it is to spare. We don't have money to spare. It comes out of a budget somewhere. My ask would be to actually document where that money's coming out of so that we can validate the differences if everything is there.
Yeah, to be clear, to just reiterate that for anybody listening to this, we do have an adopted budget. We're early in the year, so there certainly are not surplus revenues that have already been realized in 2026. So certainly the choices are going to be pulling from fund balance or reallocating for other line items. I mean, ultimately those are going to be the choices that are going to be presented to the council at this time.
Yeah, I just don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face, just to have it out there.
And I know everyone knows this, but this email will come out and obviously council can't have consensus or give direction as to what is said at this summit unless we do probably bring it back at a planning session in advance of the summit, I would say, so.
It'll probably be
I
after
don't-
the summit.
Yeah, I don't know how that would be possible because we don't know how the conversations at the summit go. So if nothing else, the email is purely informative for us and we won't make proposals or speak on behalf of the
Right.
city or the council at
To
whole.
be advocating for the needs of our residents like we would do in any other.
I want to have some homework to show the other municipalities. And so this is a little bit of work that we did. It took 5 hours. And if you guys can do that too, then now we can see what the end results are a month from now after you guys have had some time to do that. And so
Understood.
I promise you, I won't speak on behalf of the council or the city. I just want to show some homework.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we're doing. If you guys can copy that maybe as a collaborative effort, then you have something 6 months from now to talk.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you so much. As you can tell, we're extremely passionate about this. It's something that's
I,
important.
we
for our
appreciate
community
it
as well
and
as us.
honestly,
So,
it is,
We're in good company.
we are, yeah, thank you so much. And, yes, let us know how we can help and we'll get that information to y'all as well.
We'll be in touch. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you so
again.
much.
All right, thank you. Good night.
yes, you too. And I know we feel like we just got started, but it's been an hour and a half. So let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then come back. Is that Devin in the back?
Yes, he's right there.
All right, Devin, we're gonna get started. I know you're standing back there, but we're gonna get started. All right, next on there is the board and commission recommendation. Oh, no, sorry, I skipped the planning retreat. Go for that first.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna hand this directly to Rob. This is mostly just a check-in. I know there was some feedback through the last conversation that we will, I'm sure will come back up in this conversation.
Just want to cover some logistics, make sure if you have any questions, you get a chance to ask them about the retreat. Talk a little bit about the conceptual agenda, make sure that we're generally heading in the right direction as we don't have a final proposed agenda. It's more conceptual at this point. And again, get any of your questions or feedback as we enter the final stretch of planning for the retreat. So again, this is on your calendar. We'll be up in Estes Park from Friday, January 30th. We're thinking about starting at lunch through Saturday, 3:30-ish tentative end. I think the end is a little bit in flux depending on how the agenda shakes out as well as how much progress we make, but trying to end in time so that folks can get down from Estes Park for Saturday evening. Estes Park, I assume most of you have been up there. It's about a 90-minute drive, and so we're hoping for good weather and no snow on the drive up or back. And as I think everybody knows, we brought back EverStrive Solutions to facilitate the retreat. They were the group that facilitated the last retreat. And I know that they've been contacting you all about interviews, getting feedback from you. I think they've got about half of you already either scheduled or done. So thank you very much for taking the time. That's very, very helpful for them as they kind of prepare to have a productive meeting, and for us as we prepare and create an agenda that works for you. Just for context with the new folks, we'll take care, all the room and board, all the details will be taken care of. We'll send out a more updated and finalized agenda as we get closer. Really, all you need to worry about is showing up and being ready for the meeting. So just briefly to talk about the conceptual agenda, we've got about a day and a half. So we've really proposing more or less these kind of 4 major touch points. The first one being city council collaboration governance workshop. So some time spent with just you all, with the facilitator to kind of work through how you all work together and hopefully make you a cohesive team with this new council. The facilitators have a lot of ideas about that and are using, again, the feedback that you get from given your interviews to help craft a workshop that is beneficial for y'all. We also wanted to take some time to talk about, similar to last retreat, talk about some of the organizational challenges, opportunities, kind of look back, look forward on some of the things that are pressing for the organization over the next year or so. And then do again want to spend some time, now that we have an adopted strategic plan, spend some time with checking with you all on the strategic plan. A little bit about process, kind of where we are and where we're going. But really the key point of the strategic plan update from our perspective is that second bullet. We'd really like to talk to you about right now, as I think you know, we have teams for each one of your actions developing action plans. And so they're doing that right now. They won't have them ready for the retreat by any means, but we think this is a really good opportunity to once again check in with you all and make sure that if there are particular aspects of how that plan is being implemented, things need to be considered through each of the actions, that we have an opportunity for you all to talk about that, to provide some direction, have some discussion amongst yourself of, hey, this is we were talking to Lauren and Megan the other day, this is a deal maker, a deal breaker for us on this particular part of the strategic plan. So really want to have some time set aside for your feedback on that, as well as I put up there We've been referencing the outcome measures. By that point, we'll have the community survey, so we want to kind of be able to present the plan with the revised measures as well. And then as council's requested, I want to set aside some time to talk about the municipal court and the scoping and process of the master plan that was funded in the 2026 budget. So that's the conceptual agenda. Again, I know we've got some feedback, I think, from some of your interviews, not all of them. So we've got more follow-ups with EverStrive to make sure that we craft the final agenda. So at this point, that's my brief presentation. Just looking for, if you have any logistical questions, happy to answer them now or later. Again, we'll provide much more detail and make you prepared to get up there. And then any feedback you have on the agenda, things that are not on the agenda that you expected to see on the agenda, you want to make sure that we consider setting aside time for.
Justin?
Everything looks great. My only question is contingency plan in case bad weather. Is there one, and what do you suggest?
We don't have one right now. What we've typically done is if we cannot make it up, we'll have to just reschedule. I mean, that's kind of been the point that we've done. You know, if there was a desire to do something locally, you know, at a facility, maybe we could pull that off, but we've had this happen before, and what we've ended up doing is trying to work with the facility to reschedule the event.
Okay.
All right, everybody light a candle so that the weather is good and the drive is safe.
Mm.
Any other questions? Devin's carpooling.
My truck will get there. You guys.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And if council's willing, we can do some team building Friday night, maybe go check out a seance or a haunted ghost tour. I know we're not staying there, but if the weather's good, we can go there. All right, now boards and commissions.
Thank you. Good evening, council. So there are 3 boards that conducted interviews and have recommendations for you. The planning commission has 2 vacancies and there were 2 applicants. They are recommending both applicants. The Parks and Open Space Advisory Commission has 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, and they are recommending that applicant. And then the Tashco has 2 vacancies and 2 applicants, and they are recommending both of those applicants. The applications and recommendations are in your packet, and so I'm looking for your direction on whether you'd like to move forward with those.
Are there any objections? All right, so it sounds like we're willing to support the recommendations of the boards.
Okay, I do have one quick question.
Okay.
Would this mean all of our boards and commissions are full?
No,
Are there
we are
any
still
vacancies?
currently advertising for, and we're doing our reappointment advertising as well. And so that will be coming back to you on January 20th. And you'll kind of get a rundown of where all of the vacancies are and those that are wishing to be reappointed in that kind of rundown.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so that will come back for formal adoption next week. The next item is the Thornton Assistance Funds. And so last time we met, you provided direction on who to appoint. Between then and now, we have 1 individual who is no longer able to participate on the board. And so we're asking if council wants to appoint a different person. And so the 4 individuals on the top of the chart are the applicants that are still remaining. And then the others are those that you've already directed that will be appointed next week.
So we have 2 from Ward 1, 2 from Ward 2, 1 from 3, and 1 from 4 that will be appointed, correct?
Correct. And then you have staying on the board, individual from Ward 2 and an individual from.
Drew?
I thought it would be a great idea to have another Ward 3 member on there, because it looks like they might be the one that doesn't have 2 other than Ward 4, of course. To help kind of have balance across the city. And among those, I think it was Marika Seitz and Heather Gates, who seem to be well qualified for the role. Either one of those I would recommend.
Justin?
I agree with Councilmember Morris, and I really thought that Heather Aids, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but I did appreciate her experience as a victim advocate for the police department, and think that she would bring a unique perspective given her background.
Any objection to Justin's recommendation? All right, it looks like we will move forward with Heather Aids.
And that will also be on your agenda next week.
All right. Now we talk about our boards and commissions.
Right. So in your packets are all of the boards and commissions that council appoints representatives to, giving description. On the screen, it's kind of hard to see, but it lists out all of the boards and commissions, when they meet and where they meet. I'll note that the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership, they recently restructured, and so it's a little bit different than previous years. There are 3 different groups that they're looking for members on. And so they're looking for 2 members for each and then 1 alternate for those 3.
And just so you all know, I'm actually on AC Rep as the Adams County Mayor Rep, and I'm on the BAP, the Business Advocacy and Public Policy Committee. Just as a,
So I had a question on the AC rep, because I didn't see what days those new like subcommittees meet. Because the packages had the 4th Thursday or something like that, a month, but when, do you know when that?
the BAP meets usually on Monday mornings at 7:30 in the morning, and it's virtual. And it's during session. And then it doesn't meet, it usually will meet right before session, then right at the end of session, and then that's it. They don't meet when session's not happening.
Great.
All right, so for our AC Rep, we have the Civic and Business Alliance Group. They meet quarterly, but they don't have dates yet. And I believe they have a hybrid option if you can't be in person, because I do that many times.
Do we want to go through and allow, this, just speaking off my personal experience when I came on, do we want to go through and allow maybe some of the newer members to have first grab and just tell you, hey, I had considered, or like some of these vacant spots versus leftovers?
Do we want to talk as a whole, or you want to go through each one individually?
I would say if you guys, it's 3 of you, 4 technically, kind of, if you're not placed on any of them yet. Then I'd say let the 4 of them have their pick first, and then what we have vacant, we can ask or bring up as far as we need to fill.
Do you want to give just a quick overview of each? High level overview of each, but we have the spreadsheet in front of us as well.
Just the, when they meet?
No, just what they do. So we know what AC Rep does, but then the next one is the Adams County Community Transit Policy Council.
The Adams County Community,
Just Jessica, never mind.
yeah. They,
APC.
the Airport Coordinating Committee provides guidance to the kind of the county-led effort on development around the airport. CML Policy Committee helps guide policy statements during, throughout the year, but primarily focused during the state legislative session for CML positions on proposed legislation. E470 Highway Authority is kind of the governing board of that enterprise, the actual highway authority. So responsibility for kind of governance of the management of the toll road. NADA is a I speak to NADA better than I can. Let me see if I get this right. They're an advocacy group for transit. Primarily started around advocacy for the North Metro line. I think has expanded to broader advocacy for transit in the North Metro region, kind of between us and US 36 corridor, I think.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. And then Highway 7 Coalition, kind of the Boulder to Brighton Coalition that advocates for improvements and coordination on state Highway 7 improvements.
And in your packet, there is a summary, it's attachment B to the backup, and there's a brief description too. Not that Rob didn't do an amazing job.
Just like put them.
Don't read it because you'll figure out what I say, I got wrong.
So somebody, Drew, you want to go first?
Sure. I know that I-25 coalition is one that I'm interested in being part of. It looks like there's an opening there. Um, do we need to fill like all the AC rep elements? Because
We have the opportunity to.
okay.
And if I can cover, like I said, I'm on the board and I'm on the BAP and I can cover that for Thornton and the county.
Got it. So I'm interested in the AC rep Civic and Business Alliance.
I can no longer do CML because of my teaching job, so I can't do meetings during the day.
Okay.
I would be interested in talking or figuring that out, see if that is a good fit.
Probably be a good one for you. I just can't go to meetings during the day. Do we know if any of these have meetings at night? Or are they all?
I-25 is at night, and it's virtual. And Dr. Cog is, yeah. Devin or John?
Sure. So I would like to be in consideration for the E470 Highway Authority. Since Ward 3 is doing a lot of building out right there on E470 and it kind of goes through our general area, I'd like to be a part of those discussions. The other one that I think would be beneficial to be a part of as well would be the State Highway 7 Coalition.
Don?
Yeah, so I know that former council member Ryan was on the airport coordinating committee. So I would like to request to be on that. Also, I talked to Councilmember Martinez earlier today about NADA and he's looking at wanting to become the chair. So I'm looking, and there's an alternate position open, so I'll be willing to take that.
Because you're on the executive committee already for NADA?
Yes, I will be, it's kind of like I like the third ranking and then it moves up, so I'll be the chair for this year.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the alternate role?
Yes.
Cherish?
I would like to be on CML and be considered for it, and any of the AC rep. Specifically, probably, I don't care, any of the AC rep.
All right. Others? You like what you have? You want to add to it?
Did anybody take Y-25 coalition?
Drew?
Yeah, apologies, I skipped over that one in my brief explanation.
Chris?
For the alternate on 470. Sick. Same reasons.
To add to that and keep him out? Others?
I'm maxed out. I applied for executive board of the, so.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what that's gonna be, but sorry.
All right, so looking at it for AC rep, if I cover the BAP, I need an alternate and another member.
What time are they?
They're at 7:30 a.m. virtual. Yeah. Usually on Monday, but I know we were having discussions about changing it. All
I can join with that. So.
right, so you'll be the second member.
She's already on time.
And Dave will be the alternate. All right, so then we have the CBA, the Civic and Business Alliance. If Drew's a member, we need another member and an alternate. That one needs quarterly. Days are not released yet.
You had me down for civic and business.
Yep,
Okay.
CBA.
That's quarterly.
Since I go to most of the meetings anyway, I can,
Who's on
Go ahead.
economic, I'm sorry, ma'am, who's economic partnership, who's on that?
I haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay,
Nobody yet.
I'll keep quiet. Okay.
I was gonna suggest that since it was open.
I know.
All right, Drew, you and I can tag team CBA. Do you want an alternate as well?
Yeah. No.
Does anyone want to be alternate for Civic and Business Alliance? All right, Dave will be the alternate as well. You're just gonna be Dave/alternate?
Exactly, you just.
All right, and then we've got economic development, or economic partnership, that'll be Cherish. We need a second member and an alternate. First Thursday of the month.
Say what time?
It doesn't say. I don't know what time it is, and it varies. It's many times they meet over lunch, so they still wouldn't be able to.
Just get them to meet in the evening.
Get on it and move it.
You people are jobs, why do they need all the day?
Well, Cherish, if you can go to most of them, we can put me down as the second member. And then I can do the virtual option every once in a while if you can't make it, but if you can make them, then we won't have to worry about it. And then Davey will be the alternate.
It's all gonna blow up at once, everybody's.
Yep, totally.
Nobody will be there.
All right, and then ACC, we have John, and we need a second member.
Timing doesn't work with me.
Do both members get a vote, do you know?
It's been a while since I've been there. There was a time where, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, Mayor. Find that out.
Maybe we start with John and then you let us know how critical it is to have a second member. Can we do that?
I'll contact Councilmember Ryan. He was a past member and
Yeah,
I'll get some.
and I'm pretty sure he was the only one that was able to go.
Yeah.
So, all right, so for CML, we have Chris and then we had Cherish and Drew that were both interested. We need a member and an alternate. CML Policy Committee. So Drew and Cherish.
Well, Cherish, you want to be the member or the alternate? Do you have a preference there?
I'll be the member.
Okay. I'll be the alternate.
All right. Dr. Cog, we still have Justin and Roberta. E470, we have Devin and Chris. I-25, we have Drew and Dave as the alternate. NADA, we have Justin and John as the alternate. 27J is still Dave. Hey, it's not an alternate.
Yeah, solid.
And then Highway 7, we have Chris and then Devin as the alternate. That work? And just so you all know, it's not that I don't have anything but AC rep. I'm also on the Metro Mayor's Caucus and I'm the chair of the Mile High Flood District. So those are mayor appointed positions only. Just so you don't think I'm not doing anything.
What's the other one? There's like a business roundtable.
Oh, the Cobert, Colorado Business Roundtable. I do that through Metro Mayors.
Mr. NLC or.
Yeah, and the NLC board and the EENR chair. Yeah, those things.
Put on you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this will also come back next week.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is the Weld County discussion.
So we've got staff from planning coming up. So we talked about this briefly in the context of your strategic plan. In the original draft strategic plan, there was an action that stated that the city would do some pre-planning work or evaluate growth into Weld County. That was removed from the strategic plan. At that time, I did suggest that we have a more detailed conversation about some of the history of growth in Weld County and some of more recent pressures and new information that's come to the city. So ultimately, this is really to get some direction from the council about we're going to identify several alternatives of the future of how we could approach growth in Weld County. So really, this is an opportunity to get some feedback from the council. With that, I'll give it to Karen.
Sure, yeah. So good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Karen Woodamski, Long Range Planning Manager, and I'm here with Martin Postma, who's a Senior Planner for Long Range Planning as well. And as Tansy said, we're here tonight to talk with you about the city's identified growth area for Weld County. Okay, so specifically the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the city's identified Weld County growth area, update council on the city's update council on the development pressures that we're facing, and then also request council direction to conduct necessary analysis and planning. Staff did present to council at an update on this growth area in 2024, and at that time, council did provide direction not to proceed further with planning. And so we do recognize there are differing views on whether or not we should pursue this growth area. So to be clear, we are not asking for that level of policy direction tonight. However, we do want to come back to you tonight because there are some important new considerations and recent developments that we think you should be aware of. First, developer interest has really increased, and we're now receiving quite a few inquiries about annexation into the city. And in fact, specifically last month, we did receive an official pre-application proposal. And that is kind of the first step for an applicant to come in and then officially submit a annexation application. Literally just before this meeting, we got a call from another developer at like 6 p.m. tonight to ask about annexation as well. So I just want to impress upon you that this is happening now. It's not a distant thing, but it's in real time. We're really dealing with this. The second kind of update that I want to share with you is that the Colorado Energy Office has indicated their intent to award the city a $590,000 grant, which would fund Thornton to support fiscal analysis and some land use planning. And that funding could be used to fund the planning for this area. And then third, Will County has recently began updating their comprehensive plan. And it's really imperative that the city coordinate with Will County on this effort to make sure that we have some control over the land use that's adjacent to the city's boundary. Therefore, tonight's presentation is intended to provide a more comprehensive picture of the need for the city to conduct a targeted analysis so that we can objectively evaluate the proposals that we're receiving and also figure out in terms of cost, service levels, and infrastructure, what is needed to potentially serve the Will County area. So in terms of the agenda for tonight, Thornton's going to start us off by providing some background on the planning for Will County and also talk a little bit about the current development proposals that we've received. And then I am going to talk about some of the coordination efforts and analyses that are needed to ensure that the city can make an informed decision on whether or not, we want to actually even consider to move into Will County. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Martin.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm going to start with a high-level overview of the role of the Long-Range Planning Division, which involves mainly the city's developing and implementing the city's comprehensive plan and other long-range planning documents which provide an overall vision for the future of the growth of the city of Thornton. These documents consider a broad range of topics and how they interrelate with one another, including transportation, infrastructure, economic development, and many other things, to create a cohesive and functional long-range vision for how the city will grow. These planning processes typically involve extensive community engagement to ensure that the plans reflect the overall values and aspirations of our residents, businesses, and other stakeholders. Long-range plans are presented to the City Council ultimately for approval and are made public documents. The current version of the city's comprehensive plan was adopted in 2020, just over 5 years ago. It was based on extensive community visioning, a tremendous amount of public outreach and engagement, and was drafted by incorporating the latest best practices in the best interests of the population of Thornton. The document provides further guidance for all planning efforts within the city, and it upholds the vision of this community as it pertains to annexations, rezonings, and developments of all kinds. Thornton conducts a major update to our comprehensive plan approximately every 10 years. These reflect changing conditions such as demographic, economic, and growth pressures, as well as trends and values of the community. Smaller amendments take place between these major updates. Amendments to the future land use map, which is contained within the comprehensive plan, are typically done in response to annexations and amendments that are requested to particular future land use designations that are on the map. The future land use map does not show current zoning, however. The FLUM, future land use map, identifies where residential, employment, mixed use, commercial, and other types of development are envisioned to take place. With one significant exception, future land use designations serve as a guide to the zoning within the city. Long-range planning and analysis ensures that development happens in an orderly and fiscally responsible way that is directed by the city, rather than through reactive annexations and incompatible development shaped by others. This is relevant to this conversation in particular because the land identified in southwestern Weld County is identified on the future land use map as development reserve. This only indicates an intention to include it in the community once it is annexed. It does not, however, provide guidance in regard to how it will be zoned after it's annexed. This is the exception that I mentioned just a short time ago. Here you'll see the comprehensive plan, the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. The majority of the colors that are on the south of 168th Avenue, which is the majority of is all of the annexed city, as well as our growth area within Adams County, identify the types of land uses that we envision, be they commercial, residential, mixed use, employment, etc. This slide identifies the portion of the future land use map that addresses Weld County. This has the land use designation of urban reserve on it, which does not provide guidance in regard to zoning. Weld County, neighboring municipalities, property owners, and the Todd Creek Village Metro District have operated for decades under the assumption that Thornton would ultimately annex and serve this area. These expectations have influenced regional planning assumptions and utility district boundaries. The city has been viewed as the logical provider of urban infrastructure and municipal services in these areas. Since 2003, the comprehensive plan's future land use map has shown the 7 square miles that I just showed to you as in the southwestern part of Weld County as Thornton's eventual expansion. However, please note that the vision to grow into Weld County has existed since the early 1990s in different forms. Let's talk now a little bit about annexations. Developers could request annexation of land in the Weld County growth area of us at any time. Each annexation petition is reviewed to determine if the proposed annexation would be conducted in a purposeful manner, would be done in accordance with the city's comprehensive plan, and would serve the best interests of the city. One of those best interests could and should include the fiscal viability of such annexation to the city in the long term. Zoning of annexed property, which is typically done concurrent with annexation, it must be done in compliance with the vision articulated in the comprehensive plan. Once again, currently the growth area in Weld County is identified as urban reserve, which does not specify land use types, and it does not provide guidance for zoning. The city secured water supplies with the expectation that this area would develop into the city of Thornton. 3 separate developers are currently pursuing projects within Weld County's growth area. As Karen mentioned, one of them has requested a pre-application meeting, and that's been scheduled for later this month. Weld County does not provide urban level services and consistently directs developers to communicate with Thornton or other cities for annexation to support their developments. Without adequate planning, we risk losing annexations and loss of land use control. If Thornton delays, developers will seek annexation elsewhere. Nearby cities such as Dacono or Brighton are the most likely alternatives, but neither may have adequate water capacity to support this kind of growth. Without annexation, Thornton cannot guide the type or quality of land uses and amenities. This could result in lower quality, uncoordinated, and poorly serviced development at the city's border. I'll direct your attention to the map at this time. In late 2024, a developer, we're calling developer A at this time, first contacted city staff expressing interest in potentially purchasing and developing approximately 300 acres in the southwest part of Weld County. This is on the north side of 168th between Colorado Boulevard and the Holly Street alignment. The entire area is within Thornton's growth area boundary, and it's identified in that orange color. This developer is actively meeting with city staff to assess the possibility of annexation and necessary infrastructure requirements. This developer has met multiple times with, yep.
You have a quick question from Jeff.
Oh, yes.
Apologies for interrupting, but
Certainly.
is there a reason why we're calling this developer A and just not telling us what the project is?
It's not public information yet.
Okay.
So
And also, if I may, if they do decide to bring in an application, there will be quasi judicial concerns.
That makes sense.
So this developer has met with city staff on multiple occasions to collect information and receive the city's direction regarding the annexation process, requirements for infrastructure, stormwater, sanitary sewer, water service, flood mitigation, drainage, parks and open space, and other services for this area. In September 2025, just a few months ago, the city provided preliminary information about what water and wastewater improvements would be necessary to serve the area that the developer is considering, while also taking into consideration the possibility of needing to provide those services throughout the area shown on the screen. This developer continues to be interested in the site and has indicated in October of 2025 that they are interested in petitioning for annexation in the spring of 2026. Next developer, we're calling developer B, contacted staff expressing interest in potentially purchasing and developing up to 1,900 acres in the southwestern part of Weld, as well as this is within Thornton's growth area, but it also does extend to the north of our growth area. As you can see in the upper right part of the screen, there are about 230 acres there that are actually in Dacona's growth area. This developer has also met several times with staff to gain similar information, as I mentioned just a short time ago. As of September 2025, this developer has informed the city that they remain interested in the project, but need to complete some other work in other communities before pursuing this more diligently. They plan to be back with us again early this year. We would need to work closely with Tacona to plan for how that area in their growth area would be developed, of course. And finally, the third developer, we're calling now developer C, is interested in a site that's approximately 300 acres. It does overlap with the site that I just showed on the screen a moment ago. This is also entirely within Thornton's growth area boundary. And this is the property that we intend to address at a pre-application meeting later in January. And then this is a composite map that shows the development interests that we know of currently, all three of them on one. So developer A in the southern part, the darker orange, developer B, the lighter orange, including the polka dot area, and developer C is just the polka dot area. And as you can see, this is approximately, or perhaps a bit over, half of all of the developable land in Weld County within our growth area. The interest is significant. The purpose of doing active planning is to think comprehensively about what this area can be in the years ahead. This can lead to thoughtfully planned developments, which include a wide range of housing types, perhaps a downtown-like area, and a healthy selection of employment, retail, and community services. This is also an opportunity for us to engage and work closely with the developers as they design these areas. These are blank slates to the developers at this time, and they're willing to work with us towards a design that works well for us all. If we don't actively plan for this area, another community may do so, or development may take place in a less thoughtful, incremental way with uncertain long-term fiscal implications. Thornton is sufficiently sophisticated to accommodate and manage this growth. Again, please note that Weld County has told us very clearly that they will not manage urban level growth. And with that, I'll hand the baton over to Karen again.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin. So with that understanding of the development interest, I want to talk about the planning coordination and analysis that's needed to prepare for any future development in Weld County. There are several planning, legal, and utility service boundaries that affect this area. So this will require quite a bit of multi-jurisdictional coordination and negotiation. And I'll highlight a few of these in this presentation so that you can get some understanding of the complexities and really the need that we have to work through, which could take quite a while. I'm going to start with Todd Creek Metro District, which you can see on the slide. The Metro District provides water and some sewer service to properties within the surface area of the district, which is represented by the yellow hatched area on the map that you can see. As you can see, the district service area already covers some of Thornton's growth area, as well as some area that's actually within the city. That said, the city does have an intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, with this district that prevents the district from encroaching further into the city's long-term growth area. However, that IGA expires in 2028, which is going to be coming up very soon. And once that IGA expires, Todd Creek Metro District can then move in, they can serve those properties that are within our growth area. I don't think they'd have much of an incentive to negotiate with us for, for further restrictions on that. So this is a bit problematic because in general, the city does require properties that annex into the city to hook up to city services. And so, if some of this is within the Todd Creek Village Metro District, we would have to negotiate that. Currently, the IGA, in addition, several property owners have reached out to the district in order to get water services, and these are property owners that are within our growth area. Due to the IGA, the district has told them no. In fact, we have presented on this to City Council back in 2023, I think, and City Council did say that we should hold our ground and not let the district serve those properties. That said, the city also can't serve those properties because unless they annex into the city, we can't provide water or sewer. So that leaves these property owners stuck. They don't have these services. And that also creates pressure on both the city and the district to clarify future service responsibilities. Okay, so this is a little bit repetitive from what we've been saying, but I think it's important to reiterate a number of planning efforts are urgently needed considering the immediacy of the development proposals and the likely lengthy and complex process that we're going to have to go through to conduct land use planning, fiscal impact analysis for the different development scenarios, and a comprehensive assessment of the infrastructure and service needs that are needed across the entire growth area, as well as the multi-jurisdictional coordination, which I mentioned, which includes new or updated intergovernmental agreements that are necessary to address a whole bunch of things, including land use compatibility, service boundaries, wastewater management, transportation networks, and other shared responsibilities. So this all takes a while. There's a lot of work to be done to, make this come to fruition. So these steps would determine the most cost-effective service model and clarify responsibilities between what the developer would be responsible for as well as the city, which is important. Due to the complexity of this type of analysis, staff does recommend hiring a consultant that's an expert in this type of analysis. Specialized expertise will ensure that the city receives accurate financial projections and a robust evaluation of long-term service infrastructure and obligations. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the city is in the process of receiving grant money from the state that could pay for this analysis. Okay, so just a little more detail on the boundary coordination that's needed between our neighboring jurisdictions. Cities generally agree to their respective boundaries, primarily through intergovernmental agreements, as I mentioned. So in the Denver metro area, some years ago, decades ago actually, this also used to be coordinated with the Denver Regional Council of Governments, also known as DRCOG, but these days it's more just coordination directly with the different municipalities. For context, there is a distinction between municipal boundaries and the future growth area boundaries. Municipal boundaries define the current geographic extent of the city, where the provisions of that city's zoning and city codes apply. And then the growth area boundaries, and that includes our Will County area, define the geographic extent to which the city is expected to grow. And that's in the city, that's reflected on our future land use map. And that's important because it informs the public and developers as well as city council and staff and in general that growth is intended to take place within that area and that would include our city codes and our designated areas. So that's why it's important to have those future growth areas established. Okay, so another important coordination effort for us will be with Well County directly. Well County recently began and updated their comprehensive plan, and they are looking to Thornton to be the provider for urban level development within our growth area. You can see the extent of the Well County area on the larger map on the right side of the screen, along with the smaller portion of the map that's a pullout that kind of shows that white void. And that's an area that hasn't been programmed yet by Will County because they do assume that Thornton or other jurisdictions will annex that area. So for quite a long time, they haven't included it in their plan. They haven't programmed for it. And so they are expecting that we're going to meet with them and coordinate on what we plan to do. So we do need to provide guidance to Will County now, since it's a current process that they're working on, and give them an understanding of Thornton's desire for development in that area. And we want to make sure that they don't plan for undesirable uses in there. If we don't have some say in what happens there, we could have something that's incompatible to what Thornton wants to see. And so it's very important that we are able to provide guidance to Will County. Okay, and then the last coordination effort that I'm going to mention in this presentation is a pretty significant issue, actually, and that is the 1992 agreement that Thornton has with North Glen that restricts land uses and densities within portions of our growth area, both within Will County as well as Adams County, due to the construction of the North Glen treatment plant and the odors that are associated with that plant. So essentially, this agreement restricts some of the Will County land to a residential density of 1 dwelling unit per acre, which is obviously quite small. You can't build a lot of homes with 1 dwelling unit per acre. Thornton did conduct an earlier impact assessment of Will County in 2019 in conjunction with the 2020 comprehensive plan. But that assessment was based on the understanding that we would be held to these restrictions. And based on that, that initial analysis concluded that expansion into Will County wouldn't be advisable under North Glen's very restrictive conditions. Therefore, negotiation with North Glen to remove these land use restrictions really is necessary to make this area fiscally viable as well as desirable. Since the settlement agreement does cover portions of both Adams and Will County, I do want to point out that this agreement is not only impacting our growth area in Will County, but it's actually currently impacting the area in Adams County as well. And in fact, our northernmost train station for the RTD North Line is actually in an area that's impacted by this. So it's limited to 6 dwelling units per acre. And as you know, for a train station, we try to up the density a bit. So negotiation of these restrictions is a very critical thing for all of our growth areas. Okay, and then this is kind of the last slide before we kind of get to answers and questions and stuff like that. In wrapping up, this map provides an overview of the adjacent jurisdictional boundaries and proximity to the current development interests that Martin talked through in our Will County growth area. I know it's a very busy map, but the general point of this map is that Thornton does not, if Thornton doesn't express the desire to annex these properties or other properties in the future, from Will County, these developers could go to some of our neighboring jurisdictions. And as Martin said before, this could be cities like Dacono, potentially Fort Lupton or Brighton, which would be to the east. And they could collaborate with Todd Creek Village Metro District to have water and service provision. And if that happens, Thornton would lose control of this area. So with the long-standing, interest and really diligent identification of the Will County growth area within Thornton's comprehensive plan, it would be unfortunate, we think, to not put in the earnest planning effort and analysis work to make a final determination on the benefit of whether or not we would want to consider at least annexing into Will County. And I think particularly with the city's new development code and secured water supply, Thornton really is in a better position than some of these other cities to ensure good development. So really kind of comes down to, do we want to control development and see how it looks? Or do we want to leave it up to some of these other cities that might not have the same service capacities that we have? So that's kind of the final slide on that. In wrapping up in conclusion, staff would recommend that the city conduct the area planning and fiscal impact analysis for this Will County growth area so that we can effectively assess whether we should grow into this area, whether or not it's desirable and fiscally viable. Again, this work can be funded by the Colorado grant, so there is money available for it. This analysis would enable city staff to offer some direction to developers as well as to city council so that you all can make informed decision about annexations or whether or not you want to pursue annexation into this area. And then I want to stress importantly that this work doesn't require the city to grow into Will County. It's not something that says, you know, you have to grow in there. We're deciding to do it. It's simply a study to determine from a service provision, infrastructure provision, land use provision, you know, is it worth going? It's just a tool and a means to enable us to inform ourselves to know, is it worth it or is it not worth it? And then council would have the information to make that decision. So alternatively, if council doesn't want to continue with this analysis work, I would recommend that council consider removing Will County from the city's growth area and from identification or comprehensive plan. If that was the route that council wanted to go, knowing that this has been identified for decades and that we have a lot of partners and property owners that have expected Thornton to take this area in, I think it would be worth further discussions if that's really what council wants to do. And then if council wanted to retain this growth area without doing the further planning and analysis, you know, from staff's perspective anyway, I think we should be prepared that we would likely see uncoordinated and piecemeal development proposals with little understanding of the service and fiscal impacts. And this would probably likely result in highly inefficient infrastructure and service provision as well. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer questions, hear from council on the direction on how to proceed with this.
Devin?
So I have three questions actually. One is the North Glen restrictions that are in place. Is that a permanent restriction regardless of even if we annex, does it expire at any certain point in time or is it going to be?
It's a permanent restriction. I'll let Jessica speak to that though, I believe.
Yes, there was, back in 1992, there was a settlement agreement between Thornton and North Glen that settled 8 or 9 different lawsuits that were ongoing. And as part of that IGA, we agreed to certain land use restrictions that Karen had mentioned, mainly the density restrictions are what are at issue here. And that is permanent. We can either try to renegotiate that with North Glen, which there have been several attempts in the past to renegotiate that. And they have generally always asked for some sort of monetary compensation is kind of the best word I can come up with to amend that. There are also potentially legal options we could take to change it. But as of the way things stand right now, that is a permanent restriction on the development of that land.
Just something for newer council members, we have communicated with North Glen about some of our interests to plan in this area and have asked for North Glen's participation and partnership to try to understand the issues together and to potentially be able to come back to the table together as partners, just discovering together what might be alternatives to the existing settlement agreement. I don't think we've gotten definitive responses from North Glen, but we also haven't made very specific proposals about next steps either.
Do we intend on doing any further annexing down the road, or is this just what our proposed budget was from the 35 years of agreements and IGAs that were put in place?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Do we have any other further annexation that we're looking at down the road after this? And if so, what is the benefit of not doing it all at once compared to doing the smaller sections per
Yeah, absolutely. So, we would, if we kept this area, and again, since the 1990s and since 2003 on the specific map that you see, the northern portion, which is above, 168th, which is the Will County area, everything that you see in that red line is the area that we would have expected to annex into the city at some point. Now, the city doesn't annex property directly, maybe on a rare case if the city wanted, something for a city facility or something, but that doesn't typically happen. So a property owner has to approach the city to annex into the city. And at this point in time, these are the only proposals we've had. That said, it's a pretty good chunk of land. And unlike what we currently work with at the city, which sometimes can be a little bit piecemeal or even infill, this is actually a really nice opportunity for what we would call a master plan development, where you really could work with the developer to look at a wide swath of land and plan something that's much bigger versus, just a one subdivision or something over time. But the ultimate goal would be to annex that entire area over time, so.
Okay. My last question in regards to, there's a dotted line around what I presume is Eagle Shadow, which is right there above Highway 7. There's literally right above the sign where it says Highway 7. That one's not part of the Todd Creek water, but then your comment of, well, we have to have everything supplied through our side. So are they using Weld County to supply them for all of their water and sewage currently? And is there any intent to discuss with that neighborhood to say, hey, come be a part of Thornton? So if you go to the Metro District's map, actually that one might be too far up.
I think they're unincorporated Adams.
Correct. So if you go back to your map that's on page, I'm looking at the page instead of the slide. It's on, yeah, that one.
Okay.
So on the left of Quebec and on the right of Colorado, there you can see the Highway 7 actual state logo there. That neighborhood right there is Eagle Shadow, which is a neighborhood that's already there.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be unincorporated. If that were to, like, we would have to go to each individual property owner in order to have them annexed into the city.
Well, the property owners would be coming into us. So in general, the developer is probably working with the property owners to annex in. So it's not that we would have to go to them, but those property owners would be coming to us with the annexation petition. So if that answers your question.
And just to follow up, those type of annexations of developed properties requires a vote of those property owners before they even petition the city.
That answers my question.
So that it's not just, we wouldn't see them incrementalism, it'd be the whole package, usually it comes in one.
It's essentially the HOA there, where you just have to push through.
And usually that's regarding maybe their wells failed or septic systems failed or whatever, that's usually when they're looking for the city for support.
Sure. I have several questions, but thanks for the presentation so far. What is the timeline for this analysis with the consultant?
Yeah, so based on the fact that we believe we'll have the state grant, I mean, we could start, if we hire a consultant, that could occur, we could issue an RFP fairly soon. I mean, we would be looking to get done fairly soon and then start, it takes a couple of months to get through a process to hire somebody, but we would be working on it this year. The timeframe would depend on what the consultant could do with us, but it would happen this year would be our intent. Whether or not it would take, the full year or 6 months or whatever, we would just have to work with the consultant, so.
So potentially by the end of this year, it could be an analysis done that's presented to council.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
I guess, what are the potential outcomes of the study?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things. There's different components that we would be asking for. One, we would be doing a renewed fiscal impact analysis for, I think the city as a whole really for the grant, but that would include the Will County area so that we could determine whether or not which types of land uses would create a fiscally sustainable, land use composition for the city. And we would look at different scenarios along with the consultant, so that we would know if that's beneficial, but it would also look at infrastructure, what kind of infrastructure needs are would be the responsibility of the developer versus the city and how much that would cost. So that would be considered along with what are the total costs to the city. Obviously, you have to look at service provisions, including police and fire, and if you needed extra staff, anything like that. So it would really be looking at everything to make a determination if, from a fiscal perspective, it would make sense. So.
Okay. And I know that there are Arvada and Aurora kind of top of mind that are in Adams County and then another county.
Yeah.
Are there unique things to be aware of with the city operating in two counties? Things that, in addition to, of course, fiscal analysis, that's super important. Just think basically day-to-day operations, legal, all the categories that should be, would that be a part of this?
It would be part of the study, because there's things that we don't know everything. Obviously, we'll be reaching out to cities that are in multiple counties. I think a lot of us are familiar and talk to staff that, work in multiple counties. You would be looking at potentially, going to a different court system. There's different facilities that would be in Weld County that you might have to drive through up to, but that's all part of the study that we would have to do, so.
One thing that is super interesting to think about for the future in this growth area is, I think, the opportunity to be innovative as a city in this new area. And so, like, I think about, you mentioned like a small downtown type area.
Yeah.
The way that we do commercial in these areas. And even like Councilmember Martinez and I were at a like a starter home talk, is the way that they're doing residential real estate and commercial is, or do you have ideas of what the developers are thinking for these properties?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, they have given us some ideas, but one of the really nice things is that they've approached us and said, what are you guys looking for? Which is how we said, well, we'd really like to see some mixed use, something that we don't have a downtown, having something like that would be really fantastic. The benefit that we have up there is that, as I think you've all experienced, sometimes if we're working on infill in the city and maybe we want to propose higher density or we want to propose something, that can be a little bit difficult. But if you have a little bit more of a clean slate, you have a little less opposition from established people there. So you have more opportunity to do something that I think the city has envisioned for a long time. Go ahead, Martin.
I'd like to add to what Karen just said, if you wouldn't mind. In conversations with developer A, which again is that dark orange area, about 300 acres, which is adjacent to the Adams-Weld County border. In the process of working with them to come up with really preliminary information about water and sewer services, we asked them for a high-level review of what they envision to take place there. And given its proximity to the anticipated terminal station of the N line, as well as the location of the Big Dry Creek, which cuts more or less diagonally across there. The design that they offered has increased density towards the south and east so that the majority of the population can live proximate to that station. Also has commercial and employment type uses along the main roads and somewhat lower density residential towards the north and eastern side of the development. So they have a vision, which one would think would align with things that we are interested in as well, particularly higher density residential near the stations. And the developer C, with whom I visited with just a couple of hours ago, also, there you go, the polka dotted area, indicated a desire to also design a development which has a multitude of uses in it, not just a monoculture of just one type of use, if you will. So I'd say we have a good start.
Thank you.
Certainly.
John?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great presentation. Thank you. You guys are amazing. Something I learned a little new, I've been here for a while, but didn't realize, that we have a possibility to go into Weld County. So learning experience for me today. Like I said, growth, that's something we definitely need. But we need up as well as out too. But with that being said, looking at this, looking at the packet, this has been in place for 3-4 decades, right? And basically there's promises kept to Todd Creek, and we don't want to renege on that promise to them. I don't want to see any of our neighborhoods be impacted negatively by a decision that we make. So with that being said, I would be supportive of this to ensure that the Todd Creek neighborhood is, because they're part of Thornton, and as this would be part of Thornton as well. No, that's something that, that's part of the bigger picture at the end of the day. So, and also with the proximity to the terminus of the N line as well, that there will be opportunity for, folks to take the N line to go downtown. So, and also North Glen, I know the council and I know the staff are amazing. I mean, obviously we're gonna have to negotiate with them, with the water treatment plant. So, but I have confidence with our leadership and their leadership that we can work out something that we can make this happen. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions, Justin?
Where on the map is that proposed inline?
It's indicated by the yellow star just north of Highway 7 along Colorado Boulevard.
It's right there with that train bridge.
I can see now. I need new contacts.
Yep.
It sounds small.
That's right.
Cherish.
So we have not received this grant yet.
Do you want to speak to
Yeah.
that?
What we have received is a statement by the state energy office informing us that they intend to fund the grant in an amount of $590,000, specifically to fund two things. As it's relevant to this conversation, they're the fiscal analysis tool development and the land use planning that we've discussed. And we need to take a few steps to actually get that money, and we're fully capable of taking those steps.
Then can you tell me approximately how much a consultant on this cost?
Certainly, it would be, well, not more than the 590,000. We do have a 5% obligation to match those funds, and we're capable of doing that. But that's the maximum amount.
Martin, do you have
Yes.
a point of reference of another master plan? Partially, we won't know until we get proposals, but do we have a point of reference on this is a bigger scope and scale than some of our stationary master plans, and some of those have been a few years, but is there a point of reference that we can use that might be somewhat comparable?
Well, early this spring, I surveyed a variety of consultants that are capable of providing these services. And in the process of applying for the grant, we incorporated the numbers that we collected from those consultants to justify what we were requesting for those particular items. More specifically, the total amount allocated toward the land use planning, which is associated with a policy directive that the state is requesting as well, is $355,000. And the total amount associated with the development of a fiscal analysis tool, as well as another policy directive requested by the state, is $145,000. Thanks, Karen.
I have Dave and then Roberta.
I'm in support of this. I was in support of exploring this originally. It makes sense. I mean, if we have the ability to have some control over that area and what our destiny looks like, let's take it. I would rather not just sit back, let everybody else develop around that area, and then turns out we can't do anything because of the development that surrounds it, because it's not.
And to be clear, this isn't to make that policy decision.
Yeah, it's just to
To be
explore
able to know whether it
the
makes
information.
sense.
So that's my point. We need to have that information. We just, we spent 2 hours on a discussion trying to get more information. I don't understand. We have the grant money. Sounds like coming in to fund this. It's great use of those funds. It makes sense for Ward 3, so I'm in favor for it.
Are there any other cities that are getting funding to investigate this, or is it just us?
For this particular effort, since it's just our growth area, we're the only ones that applied for a grant for this area. Other cities applied for the grant for different projects and stuff, but since it's our growth area, it would just be us, so.
Okay, and is like, well, I guess like that would be a comprehensive study of this land in general, is that correct? Has there been any like, or will there be, I guess, I'm in support of investigating this, but in that comprehensive study, I hope there's investigation, just, I don't know what's up there, so if there's any contaminated areas,
Yeah.
because obviously we don't want to annex more of that, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the whole point. I mean, there's things we don't know, right? There's some things we know, and the whole point is just to do the research, see what's out there, come up with, the pros and cons, and then be able to come back to you all and say, here's what we found out, here's what you should consider that's a negative, here's a positive, and then the fiscal impact analysis should also help put some numbers to that. But obviously from other aspects of maybe barriers or great aspects as well, we would provide that also.
And will there be a compare and contrast in our development codes in comparison to other possible cities that might develop there, just so we know, like would that be something we look at, like if we're gonna be?
I'll be honest, we wouldn't have the resources for this particular project. If that's something you all want to do, we'd have to do it as a separate
I
project.
was just wondering,
Yeah.
it's not like we go down that road.
I mean, maybe at a very high level, we could at a high level, but it just wouldn't be a really in-depth study.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess it helps make the case for it if we
Yeah.
just redid this awesome code and, if somebody else were to get like this fresh land and develop it like we used to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be coordinating with the cities too. So for example, as Martin pointed out, in the developer B, I think.
That's right.
Obviously, since it goes into Dacono's growth area, we would obviously be sitting down with Dacono and talking to them and seeing what they plan, if they're receptive to it. And we could talk to them about what they might consider for that area and look at their comprehensive plan. So there would be a lot of coordination with all the cities that are within that area, as well as Will County, like I mentioned.
Cool, thank you. Chris?
So obviously I live very close. I'm in the gray box just to the left of that star there on Highway 7. So had many conversations and calls with residents that have always been upset about the smell that comes from the North Glen plant.
Yep.
They're making progress is what we're told, but it's not answering any of the questions and concerns of the residents, because in summer it smells like exactly what you think I'm going to say. So that is something that has always been a contention point for the residents on the north side. If we were not to move forward with this, then we would leave that doorway open for any other type of facility like that. In my opinion, it could be Dacono saying, well, with one dwelling unit per acre, instead we'll just put a sewage plant there too. And we just have sewage road for in the northern part of the city.
Yeah.
So with the grant funding, I think it is absolutely imperative that we take the time and effort and proceed with doing the study so that we know if there are, to your point, contaminated soils or whatever else. But doing nothing is not an option, because there's one issue when North Glen did this many years ago and there was nothing up there. The problem is the city has grown up to that border, and by doing nothing, we leave a lot of land that borders the north edge of our city that may go further down the undesirable route. And that is not going to be a lot of phone calls that I'm willing to take or wanting to take. So I am for the study. I know that it doesn't mean anything long-term of what we would commit, but we definitely should be on the offensive here, if nothing else. So it sets us up to be on the defensive side of having some control on future development.
So I'm hearing positives. Is there any objection to staff's recommendation to gather the information to help us make the policy decision necessary for this location? Thank you very much. Very much appreciate the thorough, it gives us a good thing to talk to residents about as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, the next one is the Community Volunteer Recognition Program.
So this is a very brief presentation. We'll run through this. This is mostly to keep you in the loop. So Councilmember Martinez several months ago proposed identified a gap in terms of recognizing community effort around volunteerism. You've given us some direction in the past. This is just a check-in. Frankly, we want you to help promote what we're getting ready to do. So this is a check-in. You're going to have a follow-up presentation at your next planning session. There are only a couple of people that will be recognized through this program. There was a request to widen the tent of how we could recognize people. So you will get a follow-up presentation from an agenda management perspective at your next meeting as well. So we won't get into that, but please know that's coming as well.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm Erica Senna, I'm the Budget and Operations Director, and I am filling in tonight for Emily Whittington, who previously shepherded this program. She's just out sick tonight. I'm sure she wishes she was here. So tonight, just really quickly, we'll be updating City Council on where we are in this process and our current outreach efforts for our new Community Volunteer Award program. So we'll quickly go over some background. How did we get here? What are our current outreach efforts? How might you nominate a volunteer? And then any next steps. So background, as Tansy mentioned, Councilmember Martinez requested some additional information at the very end of 2024. Staff came back in May and then again in late July of 2025, ultimately with council directing staff to implement staff's recommendation to basically provide for a program that would recognize a volunteer of the year and a youth volunteer of the year. One item I want to point out here is that this is really related to community volunteers. And just to clarify, community volunteers are a little bit separate from city-hosted volunteers. City-hosted volunteers, I have a little bit of background on the next slide, but this is a program specifically for those who are out in the community volunteering for groups other than the city. However, the city volunteers are also recognized just through different programs. So we have multiple volunteer groups throughout the city. They tend to land within different departments, fire department, police department, etc. Each of these departments celebrate their volunteers both annually and throughout the year. Annually, they do an appreciation event. Throughout the year, they celebrate their volunteers a number of ways. So what are we doing in relation to outreach efforts for this new program? So there's a number of items here. We have posted on our social media accounts, both in English and Spanish. We had a program announcement through City Notes. There are program flyers, again, in English and Spanish that were distributed to multiple city facilities, also to the Anythink libraries within Thornton. Program information will be in our upcoming City Voice issue. And then a program announcement and a digital flyer was provided to our local nonprofits, HOAs, and school contacts. So how might you all go about nominating a volunteer? I bet you all know somebody in the community who's out doing good work. There's really two separate options. Online, you can nominate a person. So we have a webpage dedicated to this. I did not include the webpage address, so I'm going to say it out loud. It's gocot.net/volunteer awards. It's also pretty easy. It pops up if you put in volunteer award into the search, it'll pop up for you as well. This webpage includes program information. It also has an online nomination form, both in English and in Spanish. There's a printable form that's available for anyone who'd rather do that rather than filling it out digitally. That's available on the website. It's also available in the city manager's office here at the Civic Center. Currently, that is only in English, but that will be in Spanish within the next week. That's basically our last thing to translate. So what are our next steps?
And this harkens back to something Tansy just mentioned. So we are going to continue marketing and hopefully increase awareness of this new program for volunteers throughout the community. And that's where you all might come in if you'd like to participate. So in your city notes this week, we're going to be providing some additional information and a blurb that you all can share through your social media accounts if you're interested. But again, we're just really looking to get the word out there since it's a brand new program. The nomination period closes March 31st. Later this year, we'll be confirming with council your availability for the recognition event at Thornton Fest. That way we can make sure we get everybody there at the right time. And then lastly, we do have a volunteerism action item in the strategic plan. That action item is to evaluate and review existing community support and volunteerism opportunities and to develop strategies to provide volunteer opportunities and resources to the community. And so, you know, what we really want to do is take the information and lessons learned from this program, from the first year of this program, and just incorporate it further into that action item. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Drew?
Maybe I missed it, but how are the winners selected?
So what we're doing is a staff panel, and it'll be a blind, so staff won't know the names of the individuals. That way, if we have interactions with them, we won't be biased. But it is a staff panel from multiple departments throughout the city who will be reviewing it on a matrix. I can't exactly explain what the matrix is at the moment. I think Emily could, but.
Well, you answered the question, it's staff panel.
Staff panel,
It's not
yes.
council is voting on.
No, sir.
something. Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roberta?
Did we ever talk about if elected officials are excluded from receiving the award?
I don't think we discussed that. I guess I would open it to council to get your feedback on that item.
Was not.
Is there a-
intent of the program.
I think that'd be smart to not,
No.
to exclude elected, including
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
All, so electeds outside of this city council even, so.
Okay.
All right.
Elected officials signed up for the volunteers.
Yeah.
Technically, you get paid.
Yeah.
Okay, we can make that happen.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right, we have an update on language interpretation at council meetings.
And this is really just an update to give you a heads up on some changes we intend to pilot this year. So open to any feedback that you have, but ultimately just wanted to check in.
Thank you. Good evening again. So yeah, the purpose of this is to just provide some information on language interpretation services at our council meetings. To get some background, the options that we looked at and considerations, and then what the pilot program will look like and next steps. So just to give some background, there was a gap that was identified in providing language services during our council meetings. And so through the end of 2025, we had a staff person attend every council meeting to provide interpretation services as needed. That was 6 council meetings, and of those 6, 3 times the person provided the services. And then during that time, we evaluated some options and came up with a pilot program that we are beginning this year. So the options that we looked at, there are 4, and they all are related to either using current staff or using a third-party interpretation service, and then either having staff virtual or having them in person, or having the third party virtual or in person. So the option that we went with was to utilize a third party on-call interpretation service. And so the way that would work is a staff person would connect with a third-party interpreter over the phone and speak to the individual that needed the interpretation service prior to the council meeting outside of the chambers to talk about what the process is for them to interact with council and to sign up to speak and so I'll answer any of their questions for in the procedure. And then during the council meeting, once the individual is called up to the podium, at the podium, we would call out to the third party interpretation service and provide them with instruction, and they would provide that interpretation. We are using a interpretation service that is used for the courts. And so they're used to being in an audience and used to having that kind of interaction with an individual. And then at the end of the podium time, if there's any follow-up that would need to occur, then that would be taken offline. And again, we would call the interpreter and have that translation. So the reasons that we chose this option was because it is a lower cost. And so we only pay whenever it's needed. They are certified interpreters. And again, they provide the service for the courts and they're used to the kind of environment. And then this would be on demand with hundreds of languages. And so it wouldn't be just languages that our employees know. It could be 100 different languages. And then we are looking for the ability to expand this use to other meetings and other city services. So we would be implementing this throughout the year and then evaluating it at the end of the year. And so with that, I take any questions that you have. Roberta?
So this is just a pay per use?
Correct.
Okay, so if we had like a staff here, it would be an on-call compensation type of situation for that person?
When we have a staff person on site, we're paying them for their time.
And if they were on call, would they be like at home or something and you pay them?
Right,
or-
it would be like an on-call.
And you would probably only be like 1 or 2 languages, correct?
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a great solution. All right, that's the last of the briefings. Do we have any board or committee reports? Justin?
I had mentioned it briefly earlier, but NADA did meet at the end of December to talk about some of the upcoming strategies and plans. We want to continue to build on the strategy of advocacy for the legislative level, particularly at the state level. And we are also organizing a campaign, I'd say, among elected officials and in the NADA group to speak at the Transportation Commission hearings for CDOT in support of the I-25 10-year project and also 270. So those are some of the more active things that NADA is going to be doing, and we're looking on building that for the next year.
Thank you. Any other board or committee reports? All right, how about discussion items? Any items to bring up for council to consider for a future meeting? John?
Oh, I don't know if this is by my line, I apologize. So, but what Councilmember Martinez mentioned, I know that CDOT's holding open houses on I-270. And those are coming up this month, so I'm thinking about attending. I think it's gonna be at Adams City High School. So I'm gonna try and make time and attend one of those, just like as an observer, not so much as an elected, but just to get the ideas, because I mean, I-270 does feed into Thornton, so we definitely need to, if there's any possibility, you know, like with helping Councilmember Martinez out at NADA to advocate for us on both those projects, I will be doing that. So.
Great, keep us posted.
Yes, ma'am.
Drew?
Tim, you had a question. After the municipal court, or I'm sorry, the Supreme Court ruling about municipal court changes and like are affecting our ordinances, you mentioned that there might be a response or something to that. Is there anything?
We are discussing that with the municipal judge. Again, the court decision was, we have to go with state fee levels, even if we have higher fee levels for the same crimes. So there are a few options there. We can change our definition of criminal activities and differentiate those, but where it's the same crime, if it is, the fee would have to be the same as the state. So we're doing kind of a financial analysis, and then we're gonna have 3 or 4 legal options in response to this. And it would come back to council most likely, I would say, February. Yeah, but we're working on it right now.
Yeah, there's a couple things. The first thing is, there's been ongoing conversations in Ward 1 about the light poles that are out around South Thornton and Excel's queue to get them replaced. Thank you, Nancy, for working with the neighborhood on that. And I guess I'd like to maybe have a further discussion. We don't need to get into the details tonight, but some of the questions are like trying to identify the breakdown of, you know, how do we inform Excel when lights are out? I think after all the conversations I've been a part of, it really comes down to Excel doesn't know what lights are out. City doesn't really know either. Both are relying on residents to report, but I don't think residents really know how or that they should be reporting them out. They're expecting the city to do it. Most of them don't even know that Excel owns those lights. So I guess I'd like to have in a planning session, a little conversation of how we can do better as a city liaison between our residents and Excel. Because I think the residents are gonna be much more comfortable coming to us and then us going to Excel. That's just been the experience so far. So I think that warrants a conversation and just kind of maybe an overview of, you know, I've been on all these emails, but and so have you. So maybe you can just give the whole council an update as to what's going on, because there's a lot of talk right now. And with Excel.
Happy to do that. We'll look at it. We have Joyce Hunt, who I gave props to is who's not here, did convene some conversations to make sure that we understood how we were doing internal tracking and how we were monitoring the databases that Excel provides. But we'll provide an update on both the efforts that we've made internally, and we'll also look at if there's some opportunities that we can better promote the ability for people to report with light. So we'll look at a schedule. It's hard to believe, but your planning sessions are already starting to fill up through the spring, but we'll look maybe late spring if that's okay.
And then the other thing is about the Thornton Shopping Center renaming survey that the economic development team has put out. And I know we're gonna talk about it on the 20th. I just would say that I think people are looking for opportunities to chime in on this. And so I would just ask that we, you know, keep at it, keep promoting it before the deadline. And yeah, that's all. I mean, I think it's too late to do anything else, but I think there's a lot of excitement about it. And maybe I think what communication gap is about the temporary use of the Thornton Shopping Center. And I think that might be the missing piece, that if we need to do like a social media post or some kind of communication, that our intent is to do something with the property in the intermediate period before the final permanent development happens.
Thank you. We can revisit the presentation for January 20th. We will be talking about the renaming, but we also will be talking about some of the upcoming community engagement planned with the neighborhood. So we can make sure that we address that intro use piece in your presentation next week.
Okay, and one last thing, I just want to pass on some information to staff. It's coming from Dr. Cog. They've informed us about the Urban Land Institute's technical advisory panel. And I'm not sure how aware or what kind of plans that staff has about it. But I highly recommend getting in touch with Dr. Cog or learning more about that program. If we have some opportunities to, you know, identify some other properties. It sounds like it'd be great for Thornton Shopping Center if this was like 2 years ago, but there might be other properties that, or other areas that under the Thornton Development Authority that could be useful to get these free resources and, you know, technical assistance. So I just wanted to inform and throw that out there.
We'll follow up in an email to everybody. I got the same notice about the ULA program, when I was with the city of Tacoma. We participated, so I did forward that on the staff. I think they were evaluating whether we have appropriate projects. We'll follow up with an email to everybody, whether or not we've identified a project that's appropriate for this year. It is a recurring program, so certainly one of our strategic plan objectives is to evaluate city-owned properties. And so even if we're a little premature now with that initiative, certainly it's on our radar for future years, but we'll follow up.
Yeah, and I'll follow up as well, because on Friday, I'm gonna be participating in the Urban Land Institute Urban Plan Workshop as part of the Municipal Leadership Academy. So it might be like a smaller scaled down version of that for our electeds, because it's a elected leadership program. So I will update everybody on how that goes, but it's gonna be pretty exciting for planning nerds like me. That's it.
Roberta?
I just wanted to see if you all were able to get a hold of Danielle Adams for
the, I think we had tried to get information on her contact. This is for Black
yeah,
History.
I sent it to you.
I will check if I missed the email to pass on the information.
Okay.
We'll make sure that we follow back up.
I think I could do that too. And then also, when you're contacting the neighborhood for the Thornton Shopping Center, is Ward 2's part of original Thornton included in that? Or what exact neighborhoods are you contacting in order to have like input into the Thornton Shopping Center?
We'll provide a greater detail next week.
Okay.
I think for the most part, my understanding is a lot of our distribution is based on people that have participated throughout that planning process. And so I don't think it's necessarily a geographically driven outreach. I think it's based on people that have expressed interest and participated throughout, but we'll confirm that and include more information next week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Devin?
Just a follow-up question to Justin's point. Are all of our streetlights owned by Excel, or is there an easier way to make the distinction if there's anything that's actually owned by the city itself? Because some of the stuff
That's
is.
a long question that takes a long time to answer.
So we do have an item on your Outlook, and I'll give you, we'll get some find some way to share some prior information. It is a complicated system. They are not all Excel lights. City owns some lights. The different power providers own lights. So we do have a broader discussion on your Outlook about our strategy around street lights more generally.
Anyone else?
Real quick.
Go ahead, Chris.
By the time I know it's been so long since been able to talk. On Highway 7, the B2B Boulder to Brighton will be free for the first 2 years with the 40-foot buses with bike. They will do the ADA stops. It will start with concrete pads with the shelters to come here in the future. It's opening summer of this year in line with the I-25 mobility hub, and will operate 5 days a week for the first year and then proceed into 7 days a week per year 2. Reconstruction still at 15% planned, which it's been there for almost as long as I've been on the coalition. So, but they said 90% done as planned for 2026. So that's a big jump. I would maybe be a little more realistic that that's not going to happen. They're still working on the comms on the websites and trying to communicate with with just residents in general that have all these questions that we usually see on them. And then they had another, I put it in quotations, but they're dubbing the I-25 Colorado 7 hub as the Union Station of the North, but they are unsure of where the money will come from and what will be available. So I think it's a very optimistic and great dream, but we know dollars and like building the Union Station of the North sounds lofty, but that's what they were stating, so I put it in quotations.
Perfect.
So potentially cool stuff.
All right, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned at 9:05. Good to see y'all.